Light and darkness existed long before us. When we look to the stars and wonder about those who came before, we must begin with the Jedi, an order whose history stretches back further than the Republic itself. Deep in the core of the galaxy, over 36,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened on a planet called Tython. 4 sensitive beings from across the galaxy arrived there, drawn by mysterious pyramid-shaped vessels known as the Thoyor ships. These weren't just random travelers. They were philosophers, scholars, priests, and warriors, all connected by their unique ability to feel and manipulate what we now call the Force. These early settlers established what would become the foundation of Jedi philosophy. They called themselves the Jedi Order, spelled with an apostrophe and double I at the end. This name reflected their original purpose: to maintain perfect balance between the light and dark aspects of the Force. They didn't see these aspects as good or evil initially, but as natural complementary forces that required careful balance. The light side, which they named Ashla, represented peace, harmony, and healing. The dark side, called Bogan, embodied passion, strength, and change. For thousands of years, the Jedi walked this middle path on Tython, building magnificent temples across the planet while developing their understanding of the Force. When students leaned too far toward either extreme, the Jedi had a unique solution. Those who fell too deeply into Ashla were sent to meditate on Tython's moon Bogan to reconnect with their passion. Those consumed by darkness were sent to the moon Ashla to find calm. This practice continued for millennia, creating a society unlike anything that would follow. Life on Tython was focused on maintaining this delicate balance. The Jedi constructed massive temple complexes across the planet where they trained and meditated. Each temple specialized in different aspects of Force study, creating a network of knowledge centers spanning the world. Students would travel between them, learning different skills and perspectives from various masters. As the population of Tython grew over generations, tensions began to build within the Order. Some Jedi became increasingly devoted to the light side, believing that Ashla offered a more beneficial path forward. Others were drawn to the raw power and freedom that Bogan provided. What had once been a philosophical difference gradually became a division that would change the course of galactic history. Around 25,800 years ago, these tensions erupted into full-scale conflict. The Force Wars of Tython began when followers of the dark side and followers of the light turned against each other in a catastrophic civil war. The exact trigger point remains lost to history, but the result was clear. Jedi fought Jedi across the surface of Tython. This wasn't just a battle between warriors. It was a fundamental clash of philosophies that had been brewing for generations. The Force itself seemed to respond to this conflict, with storms and earthquakes ravaging the planet as Force users unleashed their powers against one another. Tython's ecosystem, once beautiful and balanced, became unstable and damaged as the war raged on. For many years, the conflict continued, with heavy losses on both sides. But eventually, around 25,700 years ago, the light side adherents emerged victorious. The followers of Bogan were defeated, with many killed and others forced to flee or renounce their dark side practices. This victory marked a crucial turning point in Force philosophy. The winning faction chose to completely realign their beliefs. They abandoned the balanced approach that had defined the Jedi for thousands of years. instead fully committing themselves to the light side of the Force. To symbolize this transformation, they simplified their name, dropping the apostrophe and extra I to become simply the Jedi. The newly formed Jedi Order made a clean break from their past. They recognized that attempting to use both aspects of the Force equally had ultimately led to conflict and destruction. Their new philosophy embraced peace, knowledge, serenity, and harmony, values associated with the light side, while rejecting passion and emotion as dangerous paths that led to darkness. Among the leaders of this reformed order were several masters whose names would be remembered for generations. Rajivari, known for his wisdom, but also his stubborn pride. Garanjad, a skilled warrior who helped develop early combat techniques. Kalabrin, who emphasized meditation and Force connection. Ter Senden, who focused on scholarly pursuits and knowledge preservation. Together, these pioneers established the early foundations of what would become Jedi tradition. They created the first formal Jedi councils, governing bodies that would direct the Order through collective wisdom rather than individual leadership. This structure would remain remarkably consistent throughout thousands of years of Jedi history, though its exact form would evolve over time. The ecological damage to Tython during the Force Wars made the planet increasingly unstable and dangerous. This, combined with a desire to spread their newfound clarity about the light side, led the Jedi to make another monumental decision. They would leave Tython behind, venturing out into the wider galaxy to share their knowledge and protect others. Many Jedi relocated to a remote world called Ossus in the Outer Rim territories. Distant from major population centers, Ossus provided the isolation they needed to study the Force deeply without distraction. There, they established new temples and training facilities, beginning the process of codifying their teachings and practices. The Jedi of this era didn't yet have the lightsabers that would later become synonymous with their order. Instead, they wielded Force-imbued metal blades, ordinary swords enhanced by their Force abilities. Some experimented with early protosaber technology, the predecessors to true lightsabers, which required external power packs and had limited effectiveness compared to their later counterparts. While the Jedi established themselves on Ossus, the wider galaxy was changing too. Around 25,000 years ago, the Galactic Republic was founded, bringing thousands of star systems together under a shared government. This new political entity, centered on Coruscant, would become intrinsically linked with Jedi history moving forward. Initially, the Jedi maintained their distance from this emerging government, preferring to focus on their spiritual development rather than political engagement. But their reputation as wise and powerful Force users spread, and eventually the young Republic reached out to them. After careful deliberation, the Jedi High Council agreed to a formal alliance with the Republic, positioning the Order as guardians of peace and justice within this new galactic framework. This alliance seemed beneficial at first, but unity within the Jedi ranks didn't last long. Just 500 years after the Force Wars, the Order faced its first major internal crisis. A charismatic Jedi named Zendor grew frustrated with what he saw as increasing dogmatism within the Order. He and his lover, another Force user named Arden Lin, rejected many core Jedi teachings, particularly the prohibition against passionate attachments. Zendor advocated for greater freedom in Force study, including exploration of abilities the main Order had forbidden as too dangerous or aligned with the dark side. When the Jedi Council rejected his perspective, Zendor and Arden Lin left Ossus, gathering like-minded followers. They established a group called the Legions of Leto, named after a region where they based their operations. The Legions of Leto essentially became the first organized dark side group to split from the Jedi Order. They embraced passion and emotion as sources of power, directly challenging the Jedi emphasis on serenity and detachment. For a time, the two groups coexisted in an uneasy standoff, with the main order hoping the splinter group would eventually dissolve on its own. However, around 24,500 years ago, tensions escalated into open warfare in what historians would later call the First Great Schism. Battles between Jedi and Leto forces erupted across multiple worlds, including Ossus, Chandrila, and Brental. The conflict even reached Coruscant itself, bringing the fighting to the heart of the Republic. The newly formed Republic government threw its support behind the main Jedi Order, providing military assistance and political backing. This marked the first of many times the Jedi and Republic would stand together against what they perceived as dark side threats. The schism reached its climax at the Battle of Columbus, where Jedi Master Aldrista Pina confronted Zendor directly. In a legendary duel, Pina struck down the Leto leader. With Zendor dead, the rebellion lost momentum. Many of his followers were killed in subsequent battles, while others scattered or surrendered. Arden Lyn reportedly escaped, though legends differ on her ultimate fate. This first internal conflict established a pattern that would repeat throughout Jedi history: the struggle between orthodoxy and reform, between those who believed in strict adherence to established practices and those who sought new paths to understanding the Force. After the defeat of the Legions of Leto, the Jedi's role as protectors of the Republic became more firmly established. Their victory over what was widely seen as a dark side cult enhanced their reputation, though they remained primarily based on Ossus rather than integrating fully into Republic society. The Jedi soon faced external challenges as well. Around 24,000 years ago, the Republic entered into conflict with the Tyrannese, a rival empire that controlled significant territory in what we now call the Outer Rim. This Tyrannese War represented the first major military threat to the young Republic. Initially, the Jedi were reluctant to participate in what they viewed as a political conflict rather than a spiritual one. Their focus remained on Force study and individual development rather than warfare. However, as the fighting intensified and threatened Republic worlds, the High Council debated their proper role. After much deliberation, the Jedi decided they could not stand aside while people suffered. The Council voted to support the Republic military effort, with Jedi Knights and Masters taking positions as commanders and advisors in the Republic Army. Their strategic insights and Force abilities proved crucial in turning the tide against the Tyrannese forces. The Republic ultimately prevailed, but their victory came with troubling costs. In the final phase of the war, Republic forces bombarded the Tyrannese world of Desevro, causing massive civilian casualties. Many Jedi were disturbed by this brutality, questioning whether their participation had led them too far from their peaceful ideals. This ethical dilemma led to important changes in the relationship between the Jedi and Republic. The Order made it clear they would not serve as a standing military force for political purposes. Instead, they established a system of Jedi Watchmen, individual knights assigned to frontier worlds who could serve as peacekeepers, advisors, and first responders to emerging threats. The Republic, recognizing the Jedi's concerns, took steps to address them. They disbanded the large central military that had fought the Tyranids, instead organizing defense around individual sector forces. This decentralized approach appeased the Jedi's worries about becoming tools of centralized power, helping rebuild trust between the two institutions. With these compromises in place, the Jedi Order and Galactic Republic established the partnership that would define them both for thousands of years to come. The Jedi would serve as guardians and advisors, maintaining their spiritual independence while supporting the Republic's ideals of democracy and peace. The Republic would respect Jedi autonomy while providing the political framework within which they could carry out their protective mission. This arrangement ushered in centuries of relative stability and cooperation. The Jedi expanded their activities across Republic space, establishing smaller temples and enclaves on various worlds, while maintaining their headquarters on Ossus. They integrated more deeply into Republic society than ever before, though they always preserved a degree of separation to maintain their unique culture and traditions. Throughout this period, the Jedi remained watchful for signs of dark side resurgence. The experiences of the Force Wars and First Schism had taught them that darkness could emerge from within their own ranks as easily as from outside threats. This vigilance would serve them well in the coming millennia, as they would face many challenges to their light side philosophy. The early foundation of the Jedi Order established patterns that would persist throughout their long history. Their commitment to the light side, their sometimes complicated relationship with political power, their ongoing struggle with internal dissent and dark side temptation, all these themes would play out repeatedly across thousands of years of galactic history. From their origins as the balanced Jedi on Tython to their evolution into the light side Jedi and their alliance with the Republic, these ancient foundations created an order that would shape the galaxy for millennia to come. The conflicts they faced and the decisions they made during these formative years would echo throughout their long and storied history, setting precedents that later generations of Jedi would still follow thousands of years later. Peace never lasts forever. Following the early establishment of the Jedi Order and their alliance with the Republic, the galaxy entered an era of relative stability. But beneath this calm surface, forces of darkness gathered strength, waiting for opportunities to challenge the light. For thousands of years after the First Schism, the Jedi Order continued to grow and evolve alongside the Republic. They refined their philosophies, expanded their understanding of the Force, and settled into their role as guardians of peace. While minor conflicts occasionally demanded their attention, nothing approached the scale of the wars that would eventually come. This period of relative tranquility lasted until approximately 12,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, when a disturbing shift in Republic politics forced the Jedi to confront difficult questions about their relationship with galactic governance. A fanatical religious movement known as Pius Dea gained control of the Republic through political maneuvering, placing their leader in the position of Supreme Chancellor. The Pius Dea movement began as a seemingly benign religious order, but rapidly transformed into something far more sinister once they gained political power. Under their doctrine, the Supreme Chancellor launched what history records as the Pius Dea Crusades. a series of military campaigns ostensibly meant to punish wrongdoers but actually targeting non-human species throughout Republic space. These crusades were thinly disguised religious persecution, with entire alien civilizations branded as immoral or corrupt simply because of their species. The Republic military, previously a force for defense and stability, became an instrument of intolerance and conquest under Pius Dea leadership. The Jedi Order watched these developments with growing alarm. Throughout their history, they had maintained a delicate balance between supporting the Republic and maintaining their independence. Now they faced a moral crisis. Could they continue to serve a government that so blatantly violated the principles of justice and equality they had sworn to uphold? After intense internal debate, the Jedi made a momentous decision. Around 11,933 years before Yavin, the Order formally withdrew from their alliance with the Republic. They retreated from Coruscant back to their spiritual homeworld of Ossus, refusing to lend their authority to the increasingly tyrannical Pius Dea regime. This separation marked the first major break between the Jedi and the Republic since their alliance began thousands of years earlier. The Order effectively went into self-imposed exile, choosing to abandon their role in government rather than be complicit in persecution and violence. For nearly a millennium, the Republic remained under Pius Dea control, with a succession of chancellors from the same religious lineage continuing the crusades against non-human worlds. Generation after generation of Republic citizens grew up indoctrinated in Pius Dea ideology, while the Jedi remained distant and withdrawn, debating among themselves about whether and how to intervene. Some Jedi argued for direct action against the corrupt government, while others counseled patience, believing that all regimes eventually fall under their own weight. This debate continued for centuries, with the Order taking no unified action while the Crusades ravaged the galaxy. Finally, around 11,100 years before Yavin, after watching almost 1,000 years of persecution from afar, the Jedi decided they could no longer remain neutral. Working with allies inside and outside the Republics, including the Kamasi and other species targeted by the Crusades, they formulated a plan to overthrow the Pius Dea theocracy. Jedi agents infiltrated the Republic Navy, strategically sabotaging key Crusader vessels and communication systems. Then, in a coordinated action, a Jedi strike team led a direct assault on Coruscant itself. They confronted the reigning Supreme Chancellor Contispex XIX, the latest in the long Pius Dea dynasty, and placed him under arrest for crimes against sentient beings. The swift and decisive Jedi action caught the regime off guard. With their leadership decapitated and their military compromised, the 1,000-year reign of Pius Dea collapsed almost overnight. In the aftermath, to ensure a smooth transition back to democratic rule, Jedi Grand Master Biel Ductavis temporarily assumed the role of Supreme Chancellor. This unusual arrangement lasted just long enough to stabilize the government and begin healing the deep wounds left by centuries of religious persecution. Ductavis instituted reforms to prevent any similar takeover in the future, then willingly stepped down, returning full control to civilian authorities. With the Pius Dea Crusades finally ended, the Jedi Order renewed their alliance with the Republic, though now with a more cautious approach to political entanglement. The experience had taught them valuable lessons about the dangers of unchecked power, even when wielded by supposedly legitimate authorities. The post-Pius Dia era ushered in a renaissance for both the Republic and the Jedi. Free from religious extremism, the galactic government returned to its founding principles of democracy and inclusivity. The Jedi, meanwhile, reaffirmed their commitment to serving as guardians of peace and justice rather than instruments of any particular political agenda. This period of renewal and enlightenment lasted for several thousand years. The Jedi expanded their knowledge of the Force, built new training facilities, and established a presence on worlds across the Republic. Their wisdom and guidance helped maintain stability through countless local conflicts and political crises that might otherwise have escalated into wider wars. But approximately 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, a new darkness began to take root within the Order itself. A splinter group of Jedi became fascinated with forbidden knowledge, specifically ancient techniques that used the Force to manipulate and transform living organisms. This practice, which would later become known as Sith alchemy, represented a fundamental perversion of the life-affirming principles at the heart of Jedi teaching. These renegade Jedi began conducting secret experiments using the dark side of the Force to create monstrous creatures and enhance their own powers in ways that violated natural law. When their activities were discovered, the Jedi High Council immediately condemned the practices as heresy against everything the Order stood for. Rather than accept this judgment, the practitioners of these forbidden arts declared their independence from the Jedi Order. Led by charismatic and powerful Force users who had fully embraced the dark side, they gathered followers and established their own academies dedicated to these twisted experiments. Thus began the Second Great Schism, a conflict that would eventually transform into what historians call the 100-Year Darkness. This was not a simple political disagreement like the Pius Dea crisis, but a fundamental split within the Jedi Order itself over the very nature of the Force and how it should be used. By this era, Jedi technology had advanced significantly. The cumbersome Force-imbued metal blades of earlier periods had been replaced by more sophisticated weapons. Jedi now wielded early portable lightsabers connected by power cables to energy packs worn on their belts. While still bulky compared to later designs, these proto-sabers gave the Jedi significant advantages in combat, allowing them to cut through almost any material and deflect energy weapons. The war between Orthodox Jedi and the dark side heretics raged across Republic space for a full century. Unlike many conflicts that came before, this was primarily a struggle between Force users, with the Republic military playing a supporting role. Both sides employed powers and techniques that ordinary beings could scarcely comprehend, causing devastation on dozens of worlds. The final confrontation came at the Battle of Korbos around 6,900 years before Yavin. There, the combined forces of the Jedi Order confronted the Dark Jedi leadership, including their most powerful member, Ajunta Pal. After fierce fighting that reshaped the surface of the planet, the Jedi emerged victorious, capturing Pal and his chief lieutenants. Faced with the question of what to do with these defeated enemies, the Jedi made a fateful decision. Rather than execute the Dark Jedi, which many believed would violate Jedi principles against killing defeated opponents, the Council chose to strip them of their weapons and exile them from Republic space. These banished Dark Jedi were loaded onto unarmed ships and sent into the unknown regions beyond Republic borders, expected never to return. It was a decision born of mercy and adherence to Jedi ideals, but one that would have consequences beyond anything the Council could have imagined. The exiles drifted through space for years before eventually discovering the planet Korriban, home world of a primitive but force-sensitive species called the Sith. These red-skinned natives had developed their own unique force traditions, focusing on aspects that aligned naturally with the dark side. Seeing an opportunity, Ahunta Pal and his fellow Dark Jedi used their superior knowledge of the Force to awe and subjugate the Sith people. They presented themselves as gods or divine beings, using their powers to enforce their will and elevate themselves to positions of absolute authority. The Dark Jedi interbred with the native Sith over generations, creating a hybrid culture that combined the sophisticated Force techniques of the fallen Jedi with the raw, primal dark side traditions of the Sith species. The exiles took the name of the native species for themselves, declaring themselves Sith Lords and establishing the first true Sith Order. For almost 2,000 years, this nascent Sith Empire remained hidden from the Republic and the Jedi, gradually expanding their territory and power in the unexplored regions of the galaxy. They relocated their capital from Korriban to the planet Ziost, building an imperial society fueled by slavery, conquest, and hatred of the Jedi who had cast them out. The Jedi, meanwhile, believed the dark side threat had been permanently eliminated through the exile of the heretics. They focused on rebuilding their order after the century of warfare, establishing new traditions and safeguards to prevent similar schisms in the future. The memory of the 100-year darkness faded into history, remembered mainly as a cautionary tale about the dangers of dark side experimentation. This relative peace continued until approximately 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, when the existence of the Sith Empire was accidentally discovered by Republic explorers. Hyperspace navigators Gav and Jori Daragon stumbled upon Sith territory during an experimental jump, setting in motion events that would lead to the first direct confrontation between the Jedi and their long-lost dark counterparts. When the Daragons arrived in Sith space, the Sith Empire was in the midst of a power transition. The longtime Dark Lord of the Sith, Marka Ragnos, had recently died, and two powerful Sith Lords, Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh, were competing to claim his throne. Naga Sadow, the more ambitious of the contenders, saw in the Republic visitors an opportunity to expand Sith influence. Despite Kresh's warnings about the dangers of engaging with the Republic, Sadow orchestrated the Daragons' escape back to Republic space, secretly placing a tracking device on their ship. Following the coordinates provided by this tracker, Sadow gathered the full might of the Sith Empire and launched a massive invasion of Republic space. The conflict, which became known as the Great Hyperspace War, represented the first time the fully formed Sith Empire directly challenged the Republic and Jedi Order. The attack caught the Republic completely by surprise. Sith battle fleets simultaneously struck multiple key worlds, including Coruscant itself. The Jedi, having had no contact with the Sith for millennia, were initially unprepared for the unique dark side abilities their enemies wielded. On Coruscant, Jedi Knight Oden had foreseen the coming conflict through Force visions, but his warnings had not been taken seriously until the Sith fleet appeared in orbit. Working with fellow Jedi Mimit Nadil, Odan helped organize the planet's defenses against the unexpected assault. During the Battle of Coruscant, Naga Sadow remained aboard a meditation sphere far from the actual fighting. From this safe distance, He used Sith sorcery to create illusions that made his invasion force appear far larger than it actually was, sowing terror and confusion among Republic defenders. The tide turned when Sado's concentration was broken, causing his illusory reinforcements to vanish from the battlefield. Realizing they faced a smaller force than initially believed, Republic and Jedi defenders rallied and pushed back against the Sith invaders. Similar reversals occurred on other battlefronts, including Koros Major, where local forces led by Empress Teta and aided by Jedi Knights won a decisive victory. As the Sith offensive faltered across multiple fronts, Supreme Chancellor Pultimo ordered a counterattack. Republic forces pursued the retreating Sith fleets back to their own territory, bringing the war to the Sith homeworlds for the first time. Republic and Jedi forces invaded both Korriban and Ziost, catching the Sith Empire in a state of disarray. With their forces already depleted from the failed Republic invasion and internal power struggles resurging between Sado and Kresh's factions, the Sith were unable to mount an effective defense of their core worlds. The Republic victory was overwhelming. The Sith Empire, which had developed in isolation for thousands of years, collapsed under the Republic assault. Most of the Sith Lords were killed in the fighting or subsequently executed for their crimes. Sith cities and academies were destroyed, with their knowledge and artifacts seized or demolished by Jedi teams determined to eradicate dark side influence. In the aftermath of their victory, the Jedi undertook a galaxy-wide purge of Sith knowledge. They gathered Sith texts, holocrons, and artifacts from across Republic space, either destroying them or securing them in heavily guarded vaults. This effort reflected the Order's determination to prevent any resurgence of Sith influence within Republic borders. However, the Sith were not entirely eradicated. Naga Sado himself escaped the final battle, fleeing with a small group of loyal followers to the remote jungle moon of Yavin 4. There, he used Sith alchemy to place himself in suspended animation, preserving his knowledge and power for a future revival. Other Sith survivors scattered to distant corners of the galaxy, going into hiding or establishing small enclaves far from Republic oversight. For several centuries after the Great Hyperspace War, the galaxy enjoyed relative peace. The Republic expanded and prospered, while the Jedi Order, bolstered by their victory over the Sith, entered a golden age of philosophical and spiritual development. Few suspected that the legacy of the Sith Empire continued to survive in isolated pockets throughout the galaxy. This period of stability was shattered approximately 4,400 years before Yavin, when a talented but frustrated Jedi student named Freeden Nad fell to the dark side. Denied promotion to the rank of Jedi Knight for reasons he considered unjust, Nad grew increasingly resentful of the Order's strictures and eventually abandoned his training, striking down his own master in a fit of rage. Seeking greater power and knowledge forbidden by the Jedi, Nad followed rumors and ancient texts to Yavin 4, where he discovered the tomb of Naga Sado. Through dark rituals, he awakened Sado's spirit and became his apprentice, learning Sith secrets that had been hidden for centuries. After completing his dark side training, Nad betrayed and destroyed Sado's spirit, claiming full mastery of the Sith knowledge for himself. He then traveled to Onderon, a primitive world beyond Republic borders, where humans lived in a single-walled city, constantly threatened by the savage beasts that roamed the planet's wilderness. Using his Sith powers, Freeden Nad quickly established himself as King of Onderon, enslaving the population through fear and dark side domination. His reign lasted for over a century, during which he transformed Onderon's culture into one centered around Sith worship and the dark side. Even after his physical death, Nad's dark side spirit remained to guide his descendants, who continued to rule Onderon as a Sith-influenced monarchy. For generations, this dark legacy persisted on Onderon, unknown to the wider galaxy. Those who opposed the royal family and their dark traditions were exiled beyond the walls of the capital city Iziz, forced to survive in the beast-haunted wilderness. Over time, these exiles learned to tame and ride the flying beasts native to Onderon, becoming known as Beast Riders and waging guerrilla warfare against the city from the skies. Around 4,000 years before Yavin, as these beast wars intensified, the Jedi Order finally became aware of the dark side presence on Onderon. Master Arca Jeth led a mission to the planet, bringing several of his apprentices to investigate and hopefully end the centuries of conflict. The Jedi discovered the truth about Freeden Nad's dark influence over the royal family and attempted to purge it from Onderon. Their efforts initially appeared successful, with Queen Amanoa, the reigning monarch, defeated and her connection to Nad's spirit broken. However, they soon learned that the dark side corruption ran deeper than they had realized. King Omin, Amanoa's elderly husband, who had been thought too frail to pose a threat, revealed himself as a powerful dark side user who had been communing with Nad's spirit for decades. He launched what became known as the Freeden Nad Uprising, mobilizing a cult of Nad worshippers against the Jedi and temporarily capturing Master Arca Jeth. The conflict escalated to the point where the Republic military was called in to assist the Jedi in putting down the uprising. After fierce fighting, Omin was defeated, and Freeden Nad's spirit was finally banished from Onderon. To prevent any further dark side influence, the Jedi moved Nad's remains to the nearby moon of Duxun, burying them in a tomb of Mandalorian iron designed to contain dark side energy. The resolution of the Freeden Nad Uprising appeared to close a dark chapter in galactic history, but events would soon prove that the legacy of the Sith continued to find new vessels. Before his spirit was banished, Nad encountered two aristocrats from the Empress Teta system, Satal and Alima Keto, who had come to Onderon seeking Sith teachings. He passed crucial knowledge to them before the Jedi could stop him. The Ketos returned to their home system and used their new dark side abilities to overthrow the legitimate government, establishing a Sith cult called the Krath that would soon threaten the entire Republic. This transfer of Sith knowledge demonstrated how difficult it was to truly eliminate the dark side legacy once it had taken root. Around 4,250 years before Yavin, not long after the events on Onderon, another group of Jedi stationed on Coruscant fell to the dark side. Unlike the Freeden Nad situation, which involved ancient Sith influence, this incident appeared to be a spontaneous dark side conversion triggered by ambition and forbidden experimentation. This group attempted a coup within the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, hoping to reshape the Order according to their dark side philosophies. When the coup failed, they fled to the remote Volta system, pursued by loyal Jedi determined to bring them to justice. In the Volta system, the Dark Jedi discovered an ancient piece of technology called the Cosmic Turbine, a superweapon of unknown origin with tremendous destructive potential. In their recklessness and hunger for power, They activated the device without fully understanding its function or controls. The result was catastrophic. The cosmic turbine, once activated, could not be shut down or contained. It created a chain reaction that destroyed not just the Dark Jedi, but the entire Volta system, obliterating several planets and countless innocent lives. This incident, known as the Third Great Schism or the Volta Cataclysm, ended with the complete self-destruction of the Dark Jedi faction. The Jedi Order was deeply shaken by this third major internal division. Coming so soon after the Freedon Nad incident, it suggested that the Order's vulnerabilities to dark side influence ran deeper than many had believed. The Council implemented new safeguards and training protocols to identify potential dark side corruption earlier and prevent similar schisms in the future. While the Jedi worked to strengthen their internal stability, dark forces continued to gather strength beyond their awareness. By the late 4000 BBY period, the Jedi had established a rich academy world on Ossus, home to the Great Jedi Library founded by Oden-Ur, who had survived from the Great Hyperspace War era to become one of the Order's most revered masters. The library on Ossus became the largest repository of Jedi knowledge in the galaxy, containing countless texts, artifacts, and holocrons dating back to the earliest days of the Order. Jedi scholars and students from across the Republic journeyed to Ossus to study these collections, making it the intellectual heart of the Order. At the same time, the Jedi established a growing presence on Coruscant, building a formal temple to house those Jedi who worked most closely with the Republic Senate and government. This dual-center arrangement with spiritual and scholarly activities centered on Ossus, while political and diplomatic functions operated from Coruscant, would characterize the Jedi Order for the next several centuries. During this period of apparent stability and growth, two individuals would emerge whose actions would shake the foundations of both the Republic and the Jedi Order. The first was Exar Kun, a talented but arrogant Jedi Knight whose hunger for forbidden knowledge led him down a dark path. Despite warnings from his masters about the dangers of Sith artifacts, Kun began researching ancient dark side techniques in secret. In 3997 BBY, Kun traveled to Duxin, where he broke into Freedon Nad's tomb seeking Sith teachings. There, he encountered Nad's spirit, which guided him to the Sith homeworld of Korriban for further dark side instruction. Though Kun initially resisted total corruption, claiming he sought knowledge only for study, his exposure to Sith artifacts gradually eroded his Jedi training. Nad's spirit eventually led Kun to Yavin 4, where Naga Sadow had hidden centuries earlier. There, surrounded by ancient Sith temples and artifacts, Kun fully surrendered to the dark side. He enslaved the primitive Massassi people, descendants of Sadow's followers who had remained on the Jungle Moon, and declared himself a new Dark Lord of the Sith. Meanwhile, another Jedi Knight named Ulic Qel-Droma was pursuing a dangerous path of his own. As apprentice to Arca Jeth, Ulic had helped resolve the situation on Onderon years earlier. When the Krath cult established by the Kitos began threatening Republic worlds, Qel-Droma proposed infiltrating the group to destroy it from within, against the advice of both his master and the Jedi Council. Qel-Droma's plan backfired tragically. After infiltrating the Krath, he was injected with a Sith poison that clouded his judgment and made him susceptible to dark side influence. He fell under the spell of Alima Keto, who seduced him both romantically and spiritually. drawing him deeper into darkness until he genuinely embraced Sith teachings and forgot his original Jedi mission. Events reached a turning point when Exar Kun, sensing another powerful dark side user in the galaxy, sought out Ulic Kel Droma. Their first meeting was confrontational, with each testing the other's power in combat. As they fought to a standstill, the spirit of Marka Ragnos, the ancient Sith Lord whose death had preceded the Great Hyperspace War, appeared before them both. Ragnos proclaimed that Kun and Kel Droma were destined to rule together as Sith Lords, reviving the ancient Dark Order for a new age. He marked Kel Droma with a Sith tattoo on his forehead, symbolizing his status as Kun's apprentice and partner. Together, they formed an alliance that included the Krath cult, with Kel Droma even recruiting the Mandalorian warriors led by Mandalore the Indomitable to their cause. This coalition launched what became known as the Great Sith War, the most serious threat the Republic had faced since the Great Hyperspace War 5 centuries earlier. Unlike previous dark side conflicts, which were often limited in scope, this war engulfed much of Republic space in coordinated attacks and systematic campaigns designed to destroy both the Republic government and the Jedi Order. Exar Kun employed particularly insidious tactics against his former Jedi brethren. He visited the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, ostensibly to speak with apprentices about the dangers of the dark side. Instead, he used his charisma and power to persuade many young, impressionable Jedi to join his Brotherhood of the Sith, teaching them forbidden techniques and turning them against their masters. These corrupted apprentices returned to their academies and murdered their Jedi masters in their sleep, delivering a devastating blow to the Order's leadership in a single night. This treachery, coming from within the Order itself, shocked the Jedi to their core and left them vulnerable to the military campaigns that followed. The Sith coalition pressed their advantage on multiple fronts. Mandalorian forces led by Ulic Kel Droma launched a bold assault on Coruscant itself, penetrating all the way to the Senate building before finally being repelled and captured. When Kel Droma was put on trial for war crimes, Exar Kun mounted a daring rescue operation, walking directly into the Senate chamber during the proceedings. In one of the most audacious acts in Republic history, Kun used Sith sorcery to paralyze the assembled senators and Jedi, assassinated the Supreme Chancellor in front of the entire galactic government, and freed his apprentice, all without suffering any consequences. The pair escaped Coruscant, demonstrating the Republic's vulnerability even at its very heart. With the Republic reeling from these attacks, Kun unveiled his most devastating strategy. Using the telepathic abilities enhanced by his Sith training, he reached out to all the apprentices and knights he had secretly converted across the galaxy. At his signal, these hidden agents rose up and attacked their fellow Jedi, creating chaos and betrayal at every major Jedi installation. While the Order struggled to determine who remained loyal and who had turned traitor, Kun and Kel Droma pursued an ancient superweapon they had learned about through Sith texts. They located Naga Sado's long-lost Sith battleship, which contained technology capable of triggering stellar explosions. Using this terrible weapon, they caused the Krone Cluster, a group of 10 stars near the Jedi stronghold of Ossus, to go supernova. The resulting shockwave headed directly toward Ossus, giving the Jedi only hours to evacuate their ancient library world before it would be engulfed in stellar fire. As the Jedi rushed to save what treasures and knowledge they could from the Great Library, Kun and Kel Droma arrived on Ossus, intent on stealing whatever artifacts the Jedi couldn't evacuate in time. In the chaos of the evacuation, Ulic confronted his own brother, Kel Droma, who had remained loyal to the Jedi and now tried to convince Ulic to turn back from the dark path. In a moment of blind rage, Ulic struck down his brother in lightsaber combat. The horror of killing his own flesh and blood broke through the dark side influence that had clouded his mind for so long. As he stood over his brother's body, overcome with grief and regret, Jedi Knight Nomi Sunrider used a rare and powerful technique to sever Ulic's connection to the Force entirely. Unable to feel the Force that had been his constant companion since childhood, Ulic surrendered to the Jedi and turned away from the Sith. He offered to lead them to Exar Kun's stronghold on Yavin 4, hoping to make amends for his role in the devastation by helping to end the war. With Ulic's guidance, a massive Jedi force converged on Yavin 4, determined to bring Kun to justice. Sensing defeat, the Sith Lord enacted a desperate final gambit. He gathered all his Masashi followers into the Great Temple and performed a dark ritual of untold power, sacrificing their life energy to separate his spirit from his physical body. The ritual succeeded, but not entirely as Kun had intended. As the Jedi attack force bombarded the temples from orbit, the combined light side power of hundreds of Jedi, led by Nomi Sunrider, created what they called a wall of light to contain and counteract Kun's dark energy. The collision of these immense force powers created a firestorm that swept across the moon's surface. When the fires died down, Exar Kun's physical form was destroyed, but his spirit had become trapped within the stone walls of the Masashi Temple, neither fully alive nor truly dead. There he would remain imprisoned for thousands of years, his presence dormant but not eliminated, accessible only to those with sufficient sensitivity to the dark side of the Force. The defeat of Exar Kun effectively ended the Great Sith War, though at terrible cost. The Jedi Order had lost many of its greatest masters to betrayal. Ossus, their ancient stronghold, had been rendered uninhabitable by the supernova, though some treasures were saved through the heroic actions of Jedi like Udbanar, who used his unique botanical nature to transform into a tree, preserving both himself and the artifacts he protected. In the aftermath of this devastation, Nomi Sunrider emerged as a leader among the surviving Jedi. She convened a conclave at Exis Station to begin the process of rebuilding the shattered order. Under her guidance, the Jedi made a momentous decision to relocate their headquarters permanently to Coruscant, expanding the existing temple there into a full-scale academy and archive center. This move represented a significant shift in Jedi philosophy. By placing their main temple on the Republic capital, they signaled a closer integration with the government they served, moving away from the relative isolation they had maintained on Ossus. The Jedi High Council was reconstituted with new members to replace those lost in the war, establishing the leadership structure that would guide the Order for millennia to come. Ulic Qel-Droma, though absolved of his crimes due to his final assistance against Kun, remained cut off from the Force. He chose exile, wandering the galaxy in search of some form of redemption or peace. His story, becoming a cautionary tale taught to Jedi, initiates about the dangers of arrogance and the dark side. For the next generation, the galaxy worked to recover from the devastation of the Great Sith War. The Republic rebuilt its military and infrastructure, while the Jedi focused on training new knights to replace those lost in the conflict. This period of recovery would be shorter than anyone hoped. as new threats were already gathering on the horizon. Approximately 40 years after the defeat of Exar Kun, around 3976 BBY, the Mandalorian warrior culture that had allied with the Sith during the war re-emerged as an independent threat. Under the leadership of a new warlord bearing the title Mandalore the Ultimate, they began a campaign of conquest targeting worlds in the Outer Rim. The Mandalorians had historically been a nomadic culture of skilled fighters with a complex honor code centered around combat prowess. Following their defeat in the Great Sith War, they had retreated to rebuild their strength and rediscover their cultural identity. Now they returned, more organized and better equipped than ever before, having incorporated technology from dozens of conquered worlds into their arsenal. Their expansion began slowly at first, focusing on systems far from Republic centers of power. Many of these initial targets were worlds still recovering from the Sith War, making them vulnerable to Mandalorian aggression. As they conquered each new planet, they assimilated useful technology and resources, growing progressively stronger and more dangerous. The Republic, still rebuilding from the Sith War itself, was slow to recognize the growing Mandalorian threat. By the time Republic leadership began to take the situation seriously, Mandalorian forces had already established control over significant portions of the Outer Rim and were pushing toward mid-rim worlds. The Jedi Order, led by a High Council still traumatized by the betrayals and losses of the Exar Kun conflict, adopted a position of caution and restraint. They advised the Republic to strengthen its existing borders and prepare defenses rather than engaging the Mandalorians directly. The Council argued that there might be unseen dark side influences behind the Mandalorian advance, and rushing into conflict could repeat the mistakes that had led to disaster a generation earlier. The cautious approach proved deeply controversial within the Jedi ranks. Many younger knights who had grown up hearing stories of Jedi heroism but had not personally experienced the horrors of the Sith War believed the Order had a duty to act immediately to protect innocent lives being lost on the frontier. They saw the Council's hesitation as a failure of nerve rather than wisdom. Among these dissidents was a charismatic and talented Jedi Knight named Revan. Alongside his close friend and fellow Knight Alec, later known as Malak, Revan began speaking out against the Council's inaction, arguing that the Jedi could not claim to be guardians of peace while standing aside as worlds burned. When the Council maintained their position of non-intervention despite escalating Mandalorian attacks, Revan made a fateful decision. He would go to war with or without Council approval. Gathering like-minded Jedi who shared his convictions, Revan formed a splinter group that came to be known as the Revanchists, after their leader's name. These Jedi volunteers joined Republic military forces on the front lines, directly defying the Council's orders. Their arrival provided a much-needed morale boost to Republic troops who had been fighting a losing battle against the superior Mandalorian tactics and technology. Under Revan's strategic leadership, what had been a one-sided slaughter slowly transformed into a more balanced conflict. Revan proved to be a military genius of extraordinary caliber, developing counters to traditional Mandalorian battle doctrines and exploiting weaknesses the Republic had previously failed to identify. As the war progressed, however, observers began to notice disturbing changes in Revan and his followers. The idealistic Jedi who had set out to save innocent lives became increasingly pragmatic and ruthless in pursuit of victory. Revan adopted a distinctive mask, never showing his face in public, and his strategies grew more calculating and cold, willing to sacrifice individual battles or even planets to secure larger strategic advantages. The war reached its climax in 3960 BBY at the Battle of Malachor V. Revan deliberately lured the main Mandalorian fleet to this remote world, positioning his own forces to spring a trap of devastating proportions. He had secretly constructed a superweapon called the Mass Shadow Generator, a device capable of creating artificial gravity anomalies of incredible power. When the Mandalorian forces committed fully to the battle, Revan activated the weapon. The resulting gravitational collapse crushed both the Mandalorian fleet and a significant portion of Republic forces that Revan had knowingly left behind as a sacrifice. The planet Malachor V itself was fractured by the weapon, its surface cracked and distorted beyond recognition. In the chaos of the battle, Revan personally confronted and defeated Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat, claiming the Mandalorian leader's mask as a trophy. With their leader fallen and much of their fleet destroyed, the remaining Mandalorians had no choice but to surrender. In a ceremony that demonstrated Revan's understanding of Mandalorian culture, he ordered the defeated warriors to disarm and dismantle their armor, symbolically stripping them of their warrior identity. The Republic celebrated this victory, hailing Revan and his Jedi followers as heroes who had done what the Jedi Council would not. But the triumph came at a terrible cost, both materially in lives lost and spiritually in what the war had done to Revan himself. In the aftermath of the battle, Revan discovered something unexpected on Malachor V. Beneath the planet's fractured surface lay the ruins of an ancient Sith academy called the Trayus Academy, containing knowledge and artifacts dating back to earlier dark side eras. This discovery, combined with the trauma of the brutal campaign he had just concluded, pushed Revan further toward the dark side. Rather than return to Republic space and face judgment for their actions, Revan and Malak told the Republic they were pursuing fleeing Mandalorian forces into unknown space. This was partly true, but their primary motivation was to investigate hints they had found, suggesting a greater threat lurking beyond known space. During their explorations in the unknown regions, Revan and Malak made a shocking discovery. They found a previously unknown Sith Empire, the legacy of those who had fled after the Great Hyperspace War thousands of years earlier. This empire had been rebuilding in secret under the leadership of an emperor who had extended his life through dark side techniques for centuries. This Sith emperor dominated the minds of Revan and Malak, breaking their wills and turning these already darkening Jedi completely to the dark side. He imbued them with Sith knowledge and sent them back to Republic space as his vanguard, tasked with preparing the way for a future invasion. The newly christened Darth Revan and Darth Malak followed their instructions, but with agendas of their own. They located an ancient alien superweapon called the Star Forge, a massive space station created by the long-extinct Rakata species. The Star Forge drew energy directly from a nearby star, using it to create an endless supply of ships, droids, and weapons. Around 3950 BBY, Revan and Malak returned to Republic space at the head of a massive fleet built by the Star Forge. They brought with them countless Jedi Knights and Republic soldiers who had followed them during the Mandalorian Wars, now corrupted to serve the dark side. This force declared itself a new Sith Empire, with Revan as the Dark Lord and Malak as his apprentice. Thus began what history would record as the Jedi Civil War, though in reality it was more accurately described as a Sith invasion led by fallen Jedi. For the Republic, still recovering from the Mandalorian Wars, This new conflict was particularly devastating. Their greatest hero had become their greatest enemy, using intimate knowledge of Republic defenses against them. Revan's military genius, which had once saved the Republic, now threatened to destroy it. He specifically targeted strategic systems, manufacturing centers, and key hyperspace routes. By 3958 BBY, a large portion of Republic space had fallen under Sith control. The war was characterized by precision rather than wholesale destruction. Revan wanted to conquer the Republic, not obliterate it. For the Jedi Order, the Civil War was a nightmare beyond imagination. Many of their own had turned against them, including some of their most talented knights. The Order, already weakened by the Great Sith War and the Mandalorian conflicts, found itself fighting former friends and students. Some Jedi fell in battle, others were turned to the dark side through persuasion or torture. The Order seemed on the brink of collapse. Then, in 3957 BBY, an unexpected development changed everything. During a Jedi ambush on Revan's flagship, Darth Malak saw an opportunity. Instead of helping his master repel the Jedi attackers, Malak ordered his own ship to fire on Revan's bridge, hoping to eliminate both his master and the Jedi in a single stroke. The attack left Revan critically injured and unconscious. The Jedi strike team, led by a talented young Jedi named Bastila Shan, managed to escape with Revan's broken body just before his flagship was destroyed. Malak, believing his master dead, immediately claimed the title of Dark Lord of the Sith for himself and took control of the Sith Armada. The Jedi Council made a controversial decision regarding the captured Revan. Rather than allowing him to die or standing him trial for his crimes, they chose to heal his broken mind. In the process, they wiped away his memories of being Revan entirely, giving him a new identity as a loyal Republic soldier. Their hope was to access Revan's subconscious knowledge of Sith plans while giving him a chance at redemption. Darth Malak continued the war against the Republic, but lacked his former master's strategic brilliance. Where Revan had been surgical and calculated, Malak was brutal and direct. He ordered entire planets bombarded from orbit if they resisted Sith rule. His approach may have been less efficient than Revan's, but it spread terror throughout Republic space. In 3956 BBY, the amnesiac Revan, unaware of his true identity, became involved in the search for the Star Forge alongside Bastila Shan and other companions. Through their journey, Revan gradually recovered fragments of his lost memories and rediscovered his power in the Force. Eventually, the truth of his identity was revealed, forcing Revan to confront the legacy of his actions as Dark Lord. In a moment that would define galactic history, Revan rejected his Sith past. Whether due to the Jedi's memory manipulation or a genuine change of heart, Revan chose to fight against the empire he had created. He led a Republic mission to the Star Forge itself, culminating in a final confrontation with his former apprentice. The duel between Revan and Malak aboard the Star Forge was epic. Former master versus former apprentice, both wielding tremendous power. In the end, Revan proved the stronger. Darth Malak fell, and with his dying words acknowledged that perhaps Revan had made the wiser choice in returning to the light. With Revan's help, Republic forces destroyed the Star Forge in the Battle of Rakata Prime. Without the space station's endless supply of ships and weapons, and with its leadership decapitated, the Sith Empire quickly began to crumble. By the end of 3956 BBY, the Jedi Civil War was effectively over, with the Republic victorious but severely weakened by years of conflict. The end of the war did not bring peace, however. With Malak dead and Revan returned to the light, the remaining Sith forces fell into disarray. Ambitious Sith Lords and Dark Jedi who had served under Revan and Malak now fought each other for supremacy. This Sith civil war raged across former Sith territories, adding to the chaos and suffering of worlds already devastated by years of conflict. By 3955 BBY, this infighting had virtually wiped out many of the former Sith leaders. They destroyed each other with the same ruthlessness they had once directed at the Republic. It seemed as though the Sith might finally eliminate themselves through their own inherent tendency toward betrayal and power struggles. But from the ashes of this self-destruction, a new and more insidious Sith leadership emerged. 3 powerful Sith Lords, who had been operating in the shadows during the later stages of the Civil War, stepped forward to unite the surviving Sith under their rule. Together, they formed what history would call the Sith Triumvirate. The first was Darth Traya, once known as Kreia, who had been Revan's Jedi Master before his fall. Her specialty was manipulation and strategy, seeing connections in the Force that others missed. The second was Darth Nihilus, a being of pure hunger who had survived Malachor V only by becoming something barely human, a wound in the Force that consumed life energy. The third was Darth Sion, called the Lord of Pain, who had used hatred and the dark side to keep his shattered body intact, achieving a form of painful immortality. These 3 established their headquarters at the Trayus Academy on Malachor V, the same place where Revan had first found Sith teachings years earlier. From this hidden base, they developed a plan not merely to defeat the Republic, but to destroy the Jedi Order completely. Their approach was subtle and terrifying. Rather than engaging in open warfare like their predecessors, the Triumvirate waged a shadow campaign of assassination and subversion. From 3954 to 3951 BBY, they orchestrated what became known as the First Jedi Purge, systematically hunting down and eliminating Jedi throughout the galaxy. Darth Nihilus played a particularly devastating role in this purge. His unique ability to drain Force energy on a massive scale made him a living weapon against Jedi. The most notorious example came when Nihilus attacked the planet Katar, where the Jedi had gathered for a conclave to discuss the growing threat. In a single moment of terrible power, Nihilus drained the life from the entire planet, killing all the Jedi present and every other living being on Katar. While Nihilus hunted Jedi openly, Darth Sion tracked down survivors one by one, his broken body unable to die, giving him a relentless persistence that exhausted even the most capable Jedi Masters. Meanwhile, Traya worked from the shadows, manipulating events and setting elaborate traps to draw out any Jedi in hiding. The Jedi Order, already weakened by decades of continuous warfare, was pushed to the brink of extinction. Those who weren't killed went into hiding, severing their connection to the Force or fleeing to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Soon enough, the Order that had stood for thousands of years was reduced to a handful of survivors in hiding. In this darkest hour, an unlikely hero emerged. Mitra Surik, known in records as the Jedi Exile, had fought under Revan during the Mandalorian Wars. She had been present at Malachor V and had given the order to activate the mass shadow generator. The trauma of feeling thousands of deaths through the Force had caused her to unconsciously sever her own connection to it. Stripped of her powers and exiled by the Jedi Council for following Revan to war, Surik had spent years wandering the Outer Rim. In 3951 BBY, she returned to Republic space, gradually reconnecting with the Force. Her unique wound in the Force made her invisible to the Sith Triumvirate's detection, allowing her to move through the galaxy when other Jedi could not. Guided in part by Kreia, whose true identity as Darth Traya remained hidden for much of their journey, Surik began tracking down surviving Jedi Masters. Her goal was to unite them against the new Sith threat, but she discovered that many were unwilling to fight or had lost faith in the Jedi path altogether. As Surik's power grew, she attracted companions and rebuilt her connection to the Force. She displayed a rare ability to form Force bonds with others, drawing strength from these connections. The power would prove crucial in the coming confrontation with the Triumvirate. The final phase of the conflict began when Kreia revealed herself as Darth Traya, and the true nature of her plans became clear. She had been using Surik not simply to destroy the Sith, but as part of a larger scheme to potentially destroy the Force itself, which she had come to see as a manipulative influence on all life. Surik was forced to confront each member of the Triumvirate in turn. First came Darth Nihilus, whose attack on the planet Telos was thwarted when Surik exploited his hunger against him. The confrontation ended with Nihilus destroyed, his mask the only remnant of his existence. Next was Darth Sion on Korriban, the ancient Sith homeworld. Rather than defeating him through pure combat, Surik convinced the Lord of Pain to let go of his hatred and allow himself to truly die. It was a victory of persuasion rather than violence, showing Surik's growth beyond a mere warrior. Finally, Surik returned to Malachor V to confront Darth Traya at the Trayus Academy. Their final battle was as much philosophical as physical, with Traya testing Surik's understanding of the Force and the nature of her choices. In the end, Surik prevailed, defeating her former mentor and ending the Triumvirate's threat. With the battle won, Surik activated the repaired mass shadow generator one final time, destroying Malachor V and the Trayus Academy completely. This act erased the primary nexus of Sith power that had corrupted so many, from Revan to the Triumvirate. By around 3950 BBY, the first Jedi Purge had ended. The Sith Triumvirate was destroyed, and the surviving Sith followers scattered or went into hiding. Mitra Surik began the process of rebuilding the Jedi Order with a handful of Force sensitives she had trained during her journey. The galaxy entered a period of relative stability following these events, with the Jedi slowly rebuilding their numbers and the Republic recovering from decades of conflict. For almost 2,000 years, no major Sith power would threaten galactic peace. Individual dark side users and small cults occasionally emerged, but nothing approaching the scale of the previous Sith regimes. This period of comparative quiet ended around 2000 BBY, when a rogue Jedi Master named Fannius rejected the Order's teachings and embraced the dark side. Taking the name Darth Ruin, he gathered followers from various dark side cults and Sith remnants, forming a new Sith empire in the Outer Rim. Darth Ruin's secession triggered what became known as the New Sith Wars, a series of conflicts that would span an entire millennium. Unlike previous galactic wars, which typically lasted for years or decades, The new Sith Wars represented an era of on-and-off warfare, shifting alliances, and multiple competing factions. The early phase saw Ruin's Sith Empire strike at the Republic, which responded with military force. Darth Ruin himself eventually fell victim to betrayal from his own followers, a common fate among Sith leaders. But the movement he had started continued to grow, with various Sith warlords carrying on the fight against the Jedi and Republic. As the conflict dragged on for centuries, both the Republic and Jedi Order underwent significant changes. The prolonged strain of constant warfare pushed many Jedi toward more militant stances. Some Jedi Knights assumed the title of Jedi Lords, effectively becoming feudal rulers over entire sectors, raising armies and governing territories as a bulwark against Sith expansion. This decentralization of Jedi authority represented a major departure from traditional Order structure. Rather than operating under the unified direction of the High Council, these Jedi Lords functioned with considerable autonomy, making decisions based on local conditions and immediate threats rather than broader principles. The Republic, meanwhile, saw its effective borders shrink dramatically. Large portions of the outer and mid-rims fell under Sith control at various points, with only the core worlds remaining consistently under Republic protection. Within the contested territories, life became a cycle of occupation, liberation, and reoccupation as control shifted back and forth between Republic and Sith forces. Around 1010 BBY, after centuries of this grinding conflict, a charismatic figure emerged who would change the nature of the war. Skir Khan, a former Jedi Master who had fallen to the dark side, grew frustrated with the counterproductive infighting among Sith factions. He proposed a revolutionary approach to Sith organization based on unity and shared purpose rather than individual ambition. Khan established what he called the Brotherhood of Darkness, a Sith order that rejected the traditional hierarchy dominated by a single Dark Lord. Instead, he crowned multiple Sith as Dark Lords within the Brotherhood, creating a leadership council where all members were theoretically equal. This democratic approach to darkness was meant to eliminate the internal betrayals that had consistently undermined Sith efforts throughout history. Under Khan's leadership, the fragmented Sith forces began to reunify. With their internal conflicts temporarily set aside, they once again posed a serious threat to the Republic, launching fresh offensives that caught many worlds by surprise after decades of relative stalemate. The Republic and Jedi responded to this renewed Sith unity with their own reorganization. A Jedi Master named Lord Hoth gathered Jedi Knights and Republic forces into what he called the Army of Light, dedicated to finally ending the Sith threat once and for all. Hoth brought together many of the independent Jedi Lords under a single command structure, creating the most unified Jedi military force seen in centuries. What followed was some of the largest-scale battles between Jedi and Sith forces ever recorded, with hundreds of Force users clashing directly on battlefields across the galaxy. The final phase of this thousand-year conflict converged on the planet Ruusan, where the Army of Light cornered the main forces of the Brotherhood of Darkness. 7 major battles were fought on Ruusan, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The 7th Battle of Ruusan would prove to be the last. As defeat loomed for the Brotherhood, Lord Khan grew increasingly unstable. He turned to an ancient Sith superweapon called the Thought Bomb, a ritual device that could destroy all Force-sensitive beings within its blast radius. Believing it their only hope for victory, Khan convinced his fellow Dark Lords to help him prepare the Thought Bomb, planning to lure the Jedi close enough to be caught in its destructive radius. Lord Hoth, sensing the danger but unwilling to allow any Sith to escape, led a strike force of Jedi to confront them directly in the caves where they had gathered. The weapon detonated with catastrophic results, annihilating all Force-sensitive beings in the area. Lord Khan, his entire Brotherhood, and Lord Hoth's Jedi strike force were killed instantly. More than just killed, their souls were trapped in the caves of Ruusan, bound to the location in a state neither truly dead nor alive. Unknown to the Jedi, one Sith had deliberately stayed away from the blast zone. Darth Bane, a member of the Brotherhood who had come to reject Khan's philosophy of shared power, survived the cataclysm. From the ashes of the Brotherhood's destruction, Bane would establish a new Sith doctrine called the Rule of Two, limiting the Sith to just one master and one apprentice to prevent the infighting that had repeatedly doomed them in the past. The Republican Jedi, however, believed the Sith had been completely eradicated in the Thought Bomb explosion. With the apparent extinction of their ancient enemy, both institutions used the opportunity to implement sweeping reforms. The year 1000 BBY marked the beginning of the Ruusan Reformation, a comprehensive restructuring of both the Republic government and the Jedi Order. Supreme Chancellor Tarsus Valorum led the political reforms, reorganizing the Galactic Republic into a more demilitarized, decentralized state. The standing military that had fought through centuries of conflict was largely disbanded, with defense responsibilities transferred to individual sector forces, supplemented by a smaller central peacekeeping force called the Judicial Department. The Jedi Order underwent equally dramatic changes under the leadership of Grandmaster Fay Coven. The era of Jedi Lords came to an end, with the Order formally renouncing military titles and feudal practices. Jedi returned to their traditional role as advisors and peacekeepers rather than generals and governors. New, stricter rules were adopted regarding Jedi training. The age limit for accepting new initiates was lowered, with the Order determining that only young children could be safely trained in the ways of the Force. Older individuals with their already formed emotional attachments and established personality patterns were deemed too vulnerable to dark side temptation. Training centers that had been established across the galaxy during the wars were mostly closed, with instruction centralized at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. This allowed for greater supervision and standardization of training methods, ensuring all Jedi received consistent teaching aligned with the Reformed Order's philosophy. The Jedi rank system was formalized into the structure that would persist for the next 1,000 years. Initiate, Padawan, Knight, and Master, with clear requirements for advancement between ranks and formal trials of knighthood to mark the transition from student to full Jedi. Perhaps most significantly, the Jedi made a concerted effort to erase knowledge of the Sith from public consciousness. The Council of First Knowledge dispatched Jedi Shadows to locate and secure Sith artifacts and texts throughout the galaxy, removing them from circulation or locking them away in secure vaults where they could not corrupt the unwary. This policy of deliberate historical erasure proved remarkably effective. Within a few generations, the very memory of the Sith became little more than vague legends and scholarly footnotes, their 1,000-year war against the Republic fading from common knowledge. From 1000 BBY onward, the Republic entered what many historians consider its golden age. Free from the constant threat of Sith invasion, the galaxy experienced unprecedented peace and prosperity. Trade routes expanded, new worlds were colonized, and cultural achievements flourished. The Jedi Order, though reduced in number compared to earlier eras, entered a period of spiritual renewal and philosophical development. Without the pressure of constant warfare forcing them into military roles, Jedi could focus on their traditional duties as mediators, explorers, and students of the Force. Little did they suspect that Darth Bane's lineage of Sith Lords survived in the shadows, operating in strict secrecy according to the Rule of Two. For the next 1,000 years, this hidden line of Sith masters and apprentices would patiently build their strength and knowledge, waiting for the perfect moment to enact their revenge against both the Republic and the Jedi Order. The period that began with the Ruusan Reformation in 1000 BBY marked the end of the Old Republic era in Jedi history. The traumatic experiences of the preceding millennia, from the Pius Dea Crusades through the 100-Year Darkness and the various Sith Wars, had profoundly shaped the Order's structure and philosophy, leaving a legacy that would define Jedi identity until the very end of the Republic itself. A time of peace can be just as important as war in shaping history. After centuries of conflict with the Sith, the galaxy finally entered an era of tranquility that would last nearly 1,000 years. Following the Ruusan Reformation in 1000 BBY, the Republic and the Jedi Order found themselves in an unusual position. For the first time in generations, there were no obvious enemies to fight, no dark armies marching toward their borders. The Sith, as far as anyone knew, had been completely eradicated in the thought bomb explosion on Ruusan. With this existential threat removed, both institutions had the luxury of focusing inward, addressing structural issues and redefining their core missions. The Jedi Order had been significantly reduced in size by the final battles of the new Sith Wars. Many knights and masters had perished in the conflict, taking their knowledge and experience with them. Building back to full strength would take generations of careful recruitment and training. The early centuries following the Ruusan Reformation are sometimes called the Republic Dark Ages, though this term is somewhat misleading. It refers not to any particular calamity or suffering, but rather to a period of reduced central authority and stagnation in exploration. The Republic government, having dismantled its military infrastructure, found its ability to project power into the Outer Rim significantly diminished. Many frontier worlds drifted toward greater autonomy, though they remained nominally part of the Republic. Hyperspace exploration, which had advanced rapidly during wartime due to military necessity, slowed considerably during this period. With fewer resources devoted to charting new routes and the dangers of the unknown regions still present, the pace of galactic expansion temporarily plateaued. This contributed to the perception of these centuries as a time of introspection rather than outward growth. For the Jedi, this period was anything but dark. Free from the pressures of warfare, the Order experienced a renaissance in Force philosophy and spiritual development. Jedi scholars delved deeper into understanding the Force itself, producing influential texts that would guide the Order for centuries to come. The code that had guided the Jedi since ancient times was reaffirmed and elaborated upon, creating a more structured framework for Jedi behavior. During these centuries, the Jedi established themselves as what some called trouble consultants throughout Republic space. Without galactic wars to fight, Jedi Knights were dispatched to mediate local disputes, investigate mysterious occurrences, and generally serve as problem solvers wherever needed. These missions typically involved small teams or individual Jedi working alone, handling situations that local authorities found beyond their capabilities. But that did not require large-scale military intervention. This peacekeeping role perfectly suited the Jedi's abilities and ethics. A single knight arriving on a planet torn by civil unrest or threatened by criminal organizations could often achieve more through wisdom, negotiation, and selective use of Force abilities than an entire battalion of soldiers. The lightsaber, once primarily a weapon of war, became more of a symbol of authority and last resort during this era. Unknown to the Jedi and the Republic, however, their ancient enemy had survived. Darth Bane, having escaped the destruction of the Brotherhood of Darkness, established a new Sith doctrine called the Rule of Two. Under this principle, there would only ever be two Sith at any given time, a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. When the apprentice grew strong enough, they would challenge and hopefully kill their master, taking their place and selecting a new apprentice to continue the cycle. This approach solved many of the problems that had repeatedly undermined Sith power throughout history. By limiting their numbers, the Sith could operate in complete secrecy, invisible to Jedi detection. The constant cycle of apprentice replacing master ensured that each generation of Sith would ideally be stronger than the last, with weakness purged through natural selection. For generation after generation, this lineage of Sith masters and apprentices worked quietly from within Republic society. Unlike their predecessors who had built empires and armies, these Banite Sith focused on subtle manipulation, placing themselves in positions of influence without revealing their true nature. Each master trained their apprentice not just in dark side techniques, but in patience and discretion, building toward a revenge plot measured in centuries rather than years. The Jedi remained largely oblivious to this threat. Occasionally, disturbances in the Force or unusual dark side incidents would raise temporary concerns, but without concrete evidence of Sith involvement, these were typically dismissed as isolated phenomena. The Order's belief that the Sith had been extinct since Ruusan became so deeply ingrained that even clear warning signs were often explained away. A notable example occurred around 188 BBY, when a Jedi Padawan named Kib Jin fell to the dark side on the planet Almas. Before being defeated, Jin ranted about the continued existence of the Sith Lords, specifically mentioning a rule of two that governed their operations. The Jedi who investigated the incident officially concluded that Jin's claims were merely the ravings of a corrupted mind, but records of his statements entered the Jedi archives, planting seeds of doubt that would occasionally trouble more perceptive masters. Despite these occasional concerns, life in the Republic continued to improve for most citizens. Trade flourished in the absence of wartime disruptions. Cultural exchange between worlds reached new heights. The Senate, though often bureaucratic and sometimes corrupt, maintained enough functionality to address major crises when they arose. This general prosperity, combined with the absence of existential threats, led many to dub this era the Republic Golden Age. By approximately 300 BBY, the Republic entered a particularly vibrant phase, sometimes known as the High Republic era. Under the leadership of visionary politicians like Supreme Chancellor Lina So, the Republic launched ambitious initiatives to extend its reach and benefits further into the Outer Rim territories. The period was marked by a spirit of optimism and expansion that hadn't been seen in centuries. The Jedi Order, now restored to considerable strength after generations of rebuilding, played a central role in these efforts. Jedi Knights and Masters ventured into the galactic frontier in unprecedented numbers, helping to establish colonies, mediate disputes between settlers and indigenous populations, and generally bring the stability and justice of the core worlds to these developing regions. The Jedi of this era viewed themselves as true guardians of peace and justice, working alongside Republic pioneers to extend the benefits of civilization to forgotten corners of the galaxy. They established new outposts on frontier worlds, built relationships with isolated cultures, and generally served as the living embodiment of Republic values in regions where central authority had traditionally been weak. A landmark achievement of this initiative was the construction of Starlight Beacon, a massive space station positioned in the Outer Rim's Aram sector. Completed in 232 BBY, Starlight Beacon served multiple functions. It was partly a Jedi outpost, housing dozens of knights and masters who could respond quickly to crises throughout the surrounding sectors. It also functioned as a communications hub, strengthening connections between previously isolated systems. Perhaps most importantly, it stood as a physical symbol of the Republic's commitment to these distant worlds, a literal beacon of hope shining in the darkness of space. The dedication ceremony for Starlight Beacon represented a high point of Republic optimism and unity. Jedi, political leaders, and representatives from countless worlds gathered to celebrate what seemed like the dawn of a new era of peace and prosperity extending to every corner of the galaxy. The station's powerful transmitter broadcast this message of hope to worlds that had previously felt forgotten by the central government. The moment of triumph was short-lived, however. That same year, a catastrophic event tested the Republic's resolve and the Jedi's capabilities. A commercial vessel called the Legacy Run, traveling through hyperspace on a routine journey, unexpectedly broke apart while still in hyperspace transit. This had never happened before in recorded history, and the consequences were devastating. Fragments of the ship emerged from the hyperspace randomly across the galaxy, traveling at light speed and causing immense destruction wherever they appeared. Entire moons were destroyed in the Trimont system. The agriculturally rich Hetzal system, breadbasket for that entire sector, was showered with deadly debris threatening all its inhabited worlds. This great hyperspace disaster, as it came to be known, demanded an unprecedented response from the Jedi Order. Masters and Knights coordinated daring rescue operations, using their Force abilities in innovative ways to intercept or divert incoming hyperspace projectiles. Jedi like Avar Kriss and Elza Mann pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible with the Force, saving billions of lives through their heroic efforts. As the immediate crisis was brought under control, investigation revealed a disturbing truth. The Legacy Run disaster had not been an accident but sabotage, orchestrated by a previously unknown group called the Nihil. These anarchic raiders from the Outer Rim, led by the calculating Marchion Ro, had obtained secret hyperspace navigation techniques that gave them significant military advantages. They had engineered the Great Disaster as a demonstration of their power and a means to spread terror throughout Republic space. The Jedi Order committed fully to confronting this new threat. In the years following the Great Disaster, Jedi fought a series of engagements against Nihil marauders across the Outer Rim. The conflict proved challenging as the Nihil employed unpredictable tactics, including surprise hyperspace assaults that could bypass conventional defenses. They even deployed biological weapons on some worlds, showing a callous disregard for life that shocked even veteran Jedi. Around 230 BBY, the Nihil struck directly at the symbol of Republic hope in the Outer Rim. In a carefully planned operation, they critically damaged Starlight Beacon, causing systems failures that sent the station plummeting toward the planet below. Despite heroic efforts by Jedi on board, Starlight Beacon was destroyed, killing many, including the respected Jedi Master Stellan Gios. The destruction of Starlight Beacon represented more than just a tactical defeat. It was a psychological blow to the entire High Republic initiative, seeming to validate those who had claimed the Outer Rim was too dangerous and chaotic to be fully integrated into civilized society. The disaster temporarily isolated parts of the region behind a Nihil-created hyperspace disturbance known as the Storm Wall, further setting back Republic expansion efforts. Despite these setbacks, the Jedi and Republic forces persevered. Through coordination, sacrifice, and determination, they gradually turned the tide against the Nihil. Marchion Ro, the architect of so much suffering, was eventually defeated, though historical records vary on whether he was killed or captured. The hyperspace disruptions created by Nihil technology were resolved, allowing normal travel to resume throughout affected regions. During this same period, the Jedi also confronted another unusual threat: the Drengir, a species of sentient plants corrupted by the dark side, emerged from ancient containment and began spreading across multiple worlds. These carnivorous organisms posed a unique challenge for the Jedi, as they operated with a hive mind that made conventional tactics ineffective. Eventually, through cooperation with unlikely allies and deep study of the Drengir nature, the Jedi managed to contain this threat as well. By approximately 82 BBY, generally considered the end point of the High Republic era, the Republic had weathered these storms and emerged more interconnected and stable. The grand vision of fully integrating the Outer Rim had been tempered by practical realities, but significant progress had been made in extending Republic influence and protection to previously marginalized regions. The Jedi Order of this period had known predominantly victory and peace throughout their careers. Unlike their predecessors who had faced the Sith in open warfare, these Jedi dealt with challenges that, while serious, never threatened the fundamental stability of the Republic or the Order itself. This created a generation of Jedi who, while skilled and dedicated, perhaps lacked the hard-earned caution that comes from facing existential threats. Meanwhile, in the shadows, the Sith lineage continued its patient work. By this era, the Banite succession had reached Darth Tenebrous, a Bith Sith Lord with exceptional analytical abilities, and his apprentice Darth Plagueis, a Moon who combined financial acumen with dark side mastery. These Sith Lords manipulated galactic finance and politics from behind carefully constructed facades, advancing the grand plan initiated by Darth Bane centuries earlier. Around 67 to 65 BBY, Darth Plagueis took a significant step in this plan when he encountered a young Naboo noble named Palpatine. Recognizing extraordinary potential in this ambitious youth, Plagueis cultivated his talents and eventually took him as his Sith apprentice, bestowing the title Darth Sidious. This master-apprentice relationship would prove fateful for the entire galaxy. Over the subsequent decades, Palpatine rose steadily through the political ranks of both his homeworld and the Republic Senate, all while secretly training in Sith techniques under Plagueis' guidance. The pair worked in tandem, with Plagueis manipulating financial markets and corporate entities, while Palpatine built political alliances and influence. Together, They advanced the Sith agenda on multiple fronts simultaneously, yet so subtly that neither the Republic leadership nor the Jedi Council detected their true nature. A potentially revealing incident occurred around 52 to 53 BBY, when Plagueis and Sidious conducted secret Sith experiments on Coruscant itself. These dark side rituals created disturbances in the Force powerful enough that the Jedi sensed what they called a vergence, a concentration of Force energy unlike anything felt on the capital world in a millennium. However, without being able to pinpoint the source or nature of this disturbance, the Jedi were left with questions but no answers, another missed opportunity to uncover the Sith plot unfolding under their noses. By 32 BBY, the final pieces of the Sith Grand Plan were moving into position. The Republic had grown increasingly dysfunctional, mired in corruption and bureaucratic stagnation. Mega corporations like the Trade Federation wielded influence that sometimes rivaled planetary governments. Political deadlock in the Senate prevented effective action even on pressing issues. The system that had maintained galactic peace for 1,000 years was showing serious signs of strain. The Jedi Order, despite maintaining its esteemed position and considerable numbers, found itself increasingly challenged by these developments. Many Jedi sensed the dark side growing stronger and more pervasive, clouding their ability to perceive future events clearly. Grand Master Yoda himself noted that the dark side had clouded everything, making it difficult for even the most powerful Jedi to clearly see the threats gathering around them. What none of them realized was that this Force obscurement was the direct result of careful machinations by Darth Sidious, now serving as Senator Palpatine of Naboo, while secretly orchestrating events throughout the galaxy. After centuries of patient plotting by generations of Sith Lords, the revenge they had sought since Ruusan was finally within reach. The golden age of the Republic was drawing to a close. The Jedi Order, guardians of peace and justice for over 1,000 years, stood at the precipice of their greatest challenge, unaware of the dark forces that had been methodically positioning themselves for their destruction. The lessons of history, the hard-won wisdom of countless conflicts with the Sith, had faded into academic knowledge rather than lived experience. And in that forgetting lay the seeds of tragedy. As the Republic entered what would prove to be its final days as a democratic institution, the Jedi continued to serve with dedication and honor. Knights like Qui-Gon Jinn, Mace Windu, and countless others upheld the traditions passed down through generations. The temple on Coruscant stood as a beacon of light and wisdom at the heart of the Republic. But beneath the surface of galactic society, currents of darkness were gathering strength, preparing to sweep away the institutions and guardians that had maintained peace for a millennium. The 1,000-year golden age that followed the Ruusan Reformation had seen the Jedi Order reach perhaps its greatest height in terms of philosophical development and societal integration. During this long era of peace, the Jedi had fully established themselves as an essential institution within the Republic, their wisdom and abilities woven into the very fabric of galactic civilization. But as with all golden ages throughout history, this one too contained within it the elements of its own end, a cycle of rise and fall that seems inevitable in retrospect, yet was invisible to those living through it. Sometimes the end begins with something small. A simple trade dispute on a peaceful planet far from the galactic center hardly seemed like the spark that would ignite the downfall of both the Republic and the Jedi Order. Yet history often turns on such modest hinges. In 32 BBY, the planet Naboo found itself under blockade by the Trade Federation, a powerful corporate entity that controlled shipping and commerce across vast sectors of space. Officially, the Federation claimed they were protesting Republic taxation policies. In reality, they were being manipulated by a shadowy figure who had spent decades preparing for this moment. Senator Sheev Palpatine of Naboo presented himself to the galaxy as a concerned representative, fighting desperately through proper channels to end his homeworld suffering. Behind closed doors, wearing a concealing hood and using holographic communications, this same man secretly directed the Trade Federation as Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith. The Supreme Chancellor at that time, Finis Valorum, found himself hamstrung by bureaucracy and Senate procedures, unable to take decisive action. When diplomacy failed, Valorum dispatched 2 Jedi to negotiate directly with the Trade Federation leadership. Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi arrived at the Federation blockade expecting a tense but straightforward diplomatic mission. Instead, the Trade Federation attempted to assassinate them on orders from Sidious. The Jedi escaped the trap and made their way to Naboo's surface, where they discovered the Federation had launched a full-scale invasion. The peaceful world, known for its art and culture rather than military might, stood little chance against the mechanical droid armies marching across its green landscapes. The Jedi helped Naboo's young queen, Padme Amidala, escape the occupation. Their flight from the planet led them to make an emergency landing on Tatooine, a desert world controlled by criminal Hutt cartels rather than the Republic. While seeking parts to repair their damaged ship, Qui-Gon encountered a 9-year-old slave boy named Anakin Skywalker. The boy displayed remarkable abilities, including piloting skills far beyond his years. When Qui-Gon tested Anakin's blood, he found the child possessed the highest concentration of midichlorians ever recorded. These microscopic life forms that connected living beings to the Force were present in Anakin at levels that seemed impossible. Even more remarkably, Anakin's mother Shmi claimed there had been no father. The boy had simply been conceived, apparently by the Force itself. Qui-Gon began to suspect that Anakin might be the fulfillment of an ancient Jedi prophecy about a chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. After winning Anakin's freedom through a dangerous pod race wager, Qui-Gon brought the boy with them as they continued to Coruscant, the Republic's capital. There, Queen Amidala addressed the Senate, describing her planet's plight. When procedural delays made immediate help unlikely, she called for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum's leadership. This political maneuver, subtly guided by Palpatine, created a power vacuum that the senator from Naboo was perfectly positioned to fill. While the Senate deliberated on a new chancellor, Qui-Gon presented Anakin to the Jedi Council, requesting the boy be trained as a Jedi despite being well above the normal age for accepting new initiates. The Council, led by Masters Yoda and Mace Windu, sensed both great potential and great danger in Anakin. They initially refused Qui-Gon's request, concerned about the fear and attachment they detected in the boy. Meanwhile, Queen Amidala, frustrated with the Senate's inaction, decided to return to Naboo and fight for her planet's freedom directly. The Jedi were assigned to protect her on this risky mission. Upon returning to Naboo, Amidala formed an unlikely alliance with the native Gungan species, who agreed to field an army against the Trade Federation's droids. While this main battle served as a diversion, Amidala led a smaller team to capture the Federation's leadership in the capital city of Theed. As this plan unfolded, the Jedi found themselves confronted by a figure dressed entirely in black, wielding a red double-bladed lightsaber. This was Darth Maul, Sidious's apprentice and the first Sith Lord to reveal himself openly to the Jedi in 1,000 years. The ensuing lightsaber duel between Maul and the two Jedi moved through the palace generator complex, showcasing combat skills beyond anything seen in generations. During a moment when energy shields temporarily separated the combatants, Qui-Gon knelt in meditation while Obi-Wan watched helplessly from behind a barrier. When the shields deactivated, battle resumed. In the chaos that followed, Maul mortally wounded Qui-Gon Jinn, stabbing the Jedi Master through the torso. Moments later, a grief-stricken Obi-Wan managed to defeat Maul, slicing the Sith Lord in half and sending him plummeting down a reactor shaft. As Qui-Gon lay dying, he made Obi-Wan promise to train Anakin, insisting that the boy was the prophesied chosen one. Elsewhere in the palace, Queen Amidala successfully captured the Trade Federation leadership, while the Gungan army, despite heavy losses, tied up enough droid forces to make her mission possible. The Battle of Naboo ended in victory for the planet's defenders. In the aftermath, the newly elected Supreme Chancellor Palpatine arrived to personally congratulate Queen Amidala and assure her that the Trade Federation would be held accountable. The Jedi Council, acknowledging Obi-Wan's defeat of a Sith Lord, granted him the rank of Knight and reluctantly agreed to let him train Anakin as his Padawan. At Qui-Gon's funeral, Yoda and Mace Windu discussed the troubling re-emergence of the Sith. They recognized that Sith Lords always operated in pairs, a master and an apprentice. With Maul presumed dead, another Sith remained at large, identity unknown. What none of them realized was that this unknown master now stood at the very pinnacle of Republic power. The Naboo crisis had played out exactly as Darth Sidious planned. He had engineered a situation that elevated him to Supreme Chancellor, tested the Jedi's response capabilities, and positioned Anakin Skywalker to become a Jedi under the supervision of a young, inexperienced knight still grieving his master's death. These events had also confirmed that the Jedi remained unaware of Sidious's true identity, despite direct confrontation with his apprentice. Over the next decade, Chancellor Palpatine consolidated power while publicly maintaining the appearance of a reluctant public servant, accepting ever greater emergency authorities only out of duty to the Republic. He cultivated a special relationship with young Anakin Skywalker, taking a grandfatherly interest in the boy's development that simultaneously flattered Anakin and subtly undermined his Jedi training. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of Republic politics, discontentment was growing. Thousands of star systems had become frustrated with corruption, inefficiency, and perceived core world favoritism in the Senate. Former Jedi Master Count Dooku emerged as a charismatic leader, giving voice to these concerns. Dooku had left the Jedi Order shortly after the death of Qui-Gon Jinn, who had been his former apprentice. He reclaimed his family title and wealth on his home world of Sereno, using his status and considerable personal gravitas to gather disaffected systems to his cause. What nobody realized was that Dooku had secretly become Darth Tyrannus, Sidious's new Sith apprentice following Maul's defeat. While publicly advocating for reform, Dooku was privately working to shatter the Republic completely, following Sidious's grand design. Around 24 to 22 BBY, this movement crystallized into the Confederacy of Independent Systems, commonly called the Separatists. Corporate powers like the Trade Federation, the Techno-Union, and the Banking Clan aligned themselves with this new political entity, bringing enormous financial resources and private armies into the separatist fold. The Republic found itself facing a full-blown secession crisis. Chancellor Palpatine publicly called for calm and negotiation, while the Jedi worked to maintain peace amid rising tensions. However, the separatist movement continued to gain momentum, withdrawing member systems from Republic jurisdiction and building up military capabilities. As the threat of open warfare grew, the Galactic Senate fell into gridlock over whether to create an army to defend the Republic. For centuries, the Republic had relied primarily on local sector forces rather than a large central military, with the Jedi serving as peacekeepers rather than generals. The prospect of raising a Republic army stirred fears of escalating the conflict while simultaneously emptying already strained treasuries. What the Senate did not know was that an army already existed, created in secret years earlier. Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, having foreseen a coming conflict, had commissioned the Kaminoan cloners to produce millions of troops for the Republic without authorization from either the Senate or the Jedi Council. After placing this order, Sifo Dyas had been killed under mysterious circumstances. Count Dooku, as Darth Tyrannus, secretly took over management of the project, selecting the bounty hunter Jango Fett as the genetic template for the clone army and ensuring that special behavioral modification chips were implanted in every clone. These chips contained buried programming that would prove catastrophic for the Jedi when later activated. By 22 BBY, the clone army was nearing completion on the remote ocean world of Kamino, while tensions between the Republic and Separatists approached breaking point. The spark that finally ignited open conflict came when Senator Padme Amidala, now representing Naboo in the Senate, narrowly survived an assassination attempt on Coruscant. Chancellor Palpatine assigned Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan Anakin Skywalker to protect the senator and investigate the attack. This mission led Obi-Wan on a trail of evidence first to Kamino, where he discovered the secret clone army, and then to Geonosis, where he found Count Dooku meeting with the Separatist leadership to finalize their plans for war. Before Obi-Wan could fully report his findings, he was captured by Separatist forces on Geonosis. Anakin and Padme, attempting to rescue him, were also taken prisoner. All three were sentenced to execution in a public arena spectacle for the Geonosian population. When the Jedi Council received Obi-Wan's partial transmission, they quickly assembled a strike team of approximately 200 Jedi Knights and Masters, led by Mace Windu. This team infiltrated Geonosis and revealed themselves in the arena just as the executions were about to begin. What followed was one of the largest gatherings of Jedi in combat in recorded history. But even 200 Jedi proved insufficient against the tens of thousands of battle droids that surrounded the arena. The Jedi fought valiantly, but suffered devastating losses, with fewer than 30 surviving the arena battle itself. At the moment when all seemed lost, Grand Master Yoda arrived with the newly discovered clone army. Gunships swept into the arena, rescuing the surrounded Jedi, and clone troops engaged the Separatist droids across the Geonosian landscape. The first battle of what would become known as the Clone Wars had begun. During the chaos of battle, Obi-Wan and Anakin confronted Count Dooku directly. Despite their combined efforts, the former Jedi Master proved too skilled. He wounded Obi-Wan and severed Anakin's right arm at the elbow before Master Yoda arrived to challenge him. Though Yoda demonstrated extraordinary power, Dooku managed to create a diversion and escape, fleeing to Coruscant to report to his master, Darth Sidious. The Battle of Geonosis ended with a technical Republic victory, as the Separatist forces withdrew and many of their leaders escaped. But the cost had been high. Many Jedi lay dead. The Separatist movement remained intact, and the galaxy had been plunged into a war unlike any seen since the days of the Old Republic. Perhaps most significantly, the Jedi Order found itself in a position that would ultimately contribute to its downfall. With the Republic threatened and the clone army needing leadership, the Jedi reluctantly assumed the role of military generals and commanders, leading clone troopers into battle across the galaxy. This fundamental shift from peacekeepers to warriors troubled many within the Order. Some Jedi questioned whether military service aligned with their ancient principles, while others adapted to their new responsibilities with concerning ease. Either way, the Jedi were now irrevocably tied to the Republic's war effort, exactly as Darth Sidious had planned. As Yoda grimly observed at the end of that first battle, the Clone Wars had begun, and with them, the final act in the Sith's 1,000-year revenge plot against both the Republic and the Jedi Order. The conflict that followed spanned 3 brutal years and touched virtually every inhabited system in the galaxy. Republic forces led by Jedi generals and comprised primarily of clone troopers battled Separatist armies of droids across hundreds of worlds. Both sides employed increasingly destructive weapons and tactics as the war dragged on, bringing suffering to countless civilian populations caught in the crossfire. For the Jedi, the Clone Wars represented a period of both heroism and compromise. Individual Jedi performed countless acts of courage and self-sacrifice, saving millions of lives across the galaxy. Yet the Order as a whole found itself drifting further from its spiritual foundations as military necessities took precedence over traditional Jedi values. Anakin Skywalker emerged as one of the Republic's greatest heroes during this period, earning the nickname the Hero with No Fear for his battlefield successes and daring tactics. He commanded the elite 501st Legion of clone troopers, developing a bond with his men that went beyond typical general-soldier relationships. Particularly close was his connection to Captain Rex, who served as his second-in-command in many campaigns. Despite his public heroics, Anakin harbored secrets that would have shocked both the Republic public and the Jedi Council. Shortly after the war began, he had secretly married Senator Padme Amidala on Naboo, directly violating the Jedi prohibition against forming attachments. This clandestine relationship became a source of both joy and stress for Anakin, as he constantly feared discovery while also struggling to balance his duties as a Jedi with his desires as a husband. Obi-Wan Kenobi likewise distinguished himself throughout the conflict, earning recognition as one of the Order's finest generals and negotiators. His methodical approach complemented Anakin's more impulsive style, making them an effective team on many missions. Obi-Wan formed a strong working relationship with his clone commander Cody, though he maintained more professional boundaries than Anakin did with his troops. The Separatist leadership, directed from the shadows by Darth Sidious, employed various dark side adepts and specialized warriors to counter the Jedi's effectiveness in battle. Chief among these was General Grievous, a cyborg warlord who had been trained in lightsaber combat by Count Dooku himself. Grievous made a shocking debut approximately 4 months into the war at the Battle of Hippori, where he single-handedly defeated several Jedi Masters and established his reputation as a Jedi killer. Another significant threat came from Asajj Ventress, a Dathomirian dark side assassin who served as Dooku's personal agent for much of the war. Ventress dueled both Obi-Wan and Anakin multiple times, developing particular rivalries with both Jedi. Her acrobatic fighting style and twin red lightsabers made her one of the most recognizable Separatist operatives in the conflict. Some Jedi who had fallen to the dark side also fought for the Separatist cause. Sora Bulk, once a respected Jedi Master and lightsaber instructor, defected to Dooku's side and helped foment a short-lived schism within the Jedi ranks early in the war. His intimate knowledge of Jedi techniques and personalities made him especially dangerous. The pressure of war forced the Jedi to adapt in ways that sometimes compromised their principles. Some knights and masters became hardened military commanders, making decisions based on strategic necessity rather than compassion or wisdom. Others struggled to maintain their Jedi ideals amid the chaos of war, questioning both themselves and the Order's direction. A small number of Jedi refused to fight altogether, feeling that military service fundamentally contradicted the Jedi Code's emphasis on peace. These conscientious objectors, including some archivists led by Master Jocasta Nu, formed splinter groups that focused on preserving knowledge and healing rather than warfare. While these pacifist Jedi had little impact on the overall conflict, their existence highlighted the ethical dilemmas the Order faced. The war also brought changes to Jedi training practices. With knights and masters spread thin across numerous battlefronts, Padawans often took on responsibilities far beyond their traditional roles. Many became battlefield commanders themselves, leading clone troopers into combat at ages when they would normally still be focused primarily on their studies. This accelerated path led to high casualty rates among Padawans. One particularly devastating example occurred at the Battle of Jabiim, where a group of apprentices known as the Padawan Pack was nearly wiped out while fighting alongside Anakin Skywalker after his master Obi-Wan was presumed dead. Anakin emerged as one of the few survivors, an experience that reinforced his fear of losing those close to him. As the war entered its third year, the Separatist forces began to falter under relentless Republic pressure. Count Dooku had lost some of his key assets, including Asajj Ventress, who went into exile after Dooku betrayed her on Sidious's orders. Many Separatist strongholds had fallen, and their leadership was increasingly on the defensive. Sensing the approaching endgame, Darth Sidious initiated the final phase of his grand plan. He orchestrated a bold strike at the heart of the Republic, recalling General Grievous and the main Separatist fleet for a surprise assault on Coruscant itself. This attack caught the Republic capital partially unprepared, as many Jedi and clone forces were deployed in the Outer Rim sieges, a series of major campaigns aimed at reclaiming Separatist-held worlds. Jedi like Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Aayla Secura were commanding clone battalions on distant planets like Felucia, Megiddo, and Saleucami when Coruscant came under attack. With the planet's defenses overwhelmed, General Grievous led a daring raid on the Chancellor's quarters, abducting Palpatine and taking him aboard the Separatist flagship Invisible Hand. This apparent captivity was, of course, part of Sidious's own scheme, creating the perfect scenario to draw in his intended target, Anakin Skywalker. The Republic's response to this crisis was immediate. Despite the distance, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker were recalled from the Outer Rim to lead a dangerous rescue mission. The two Jedi, now widely recognized as among the Order's finest warriors, piloted starfighters through the massive space battle raging above Coruscant and managed to board Grievous's flagship. Fighting their way through the vessel, they located Chancellor Palpatine secured to a chair in the ship's observation deck. There they also encountered Count Dooku, setting the stage for their final confrontation with the Separatist leader. The ensuing lightsaber duel quickly turned against the Jedi when Dooku used the Force to incapacitate Obi-Wan, leaving Anakin to face him alone. Drawing on his anger, especially after seeing his former master injured, Anakin fought with unprecedented intensity. He overwhelmed Dooku's defenses, cutting off both the Count's hands and leaving him kneeling, defenseless. At this crucial moment, Chancellor Palpatine urged Anakin to kill the disarmed Dooku. Though hesitant at first, recognizing that executing a helpless prisoner violated the Jedi Code, Anakin gave in to Palpatine's pressure and beheaded the Separatist leader. This act represented a significant step toward the dark side, though Anakin himself did not fully recognize the line he had crossed. With Dooku dead, the trio attempted to escape the damaged flagship, which was rapidly losing altitude and breaking apart in Coruscant's atmosphere. Despite further complications, including a brief confrontation with General Grievous who managed to flee the ship, Anakin's exceptional piloting skills enabled them to crash land what remained of the vessel on a Coruscant landing platform. The rescue of Chancellor Palpatine was celebrated as a tremendous victory for the Republic and personally elevated Anakin's already considerable public profile. Behind the scenes, however, this mission had served Sidious's purposes perfectly. Dooku, having fulfilled his role in the grand plan, had been eliminated, and Anakin had taken another step toward the dark side by executing a defenseless enemy at Palpatine's behest. In the days following the Battle of Coruscant, Chancellor Palpatine moved to consolidate his political power. He appointed Anakin as his personal representative on the Jedi Council. The Jedi leadership, increasingly suspicious of Palpatine's motives and the continued growth of his emergency powers, accepted Anakin to the Council but denied him the rank of Master, an unusual and somewhat humiliating distinction. They then tasked him with spying on the Chancellor and reporting on his activities, placing Anakin in an agonizing position between his loyalty to the Jedi Order and his friendship with Palpatine. As this internal conflict tortured Anakin, his personal life added further stress. He began experiencing prophetic nightmares, showing Padme dying in childbirth. Having secretly learned of her pregnancy, these visions filled him with terror of losing her just as he had lost his mother years earlier on Tatooine. Meanwhile, Republic forces continued pressing their advantage against the Separatists. Obi-Wan was dispatched to the sinkhole world of Utapau, where intelligence had located General Grievous. After a lengthy pursuit and fierce combat, Kenobi managed to kill the cyborg general, removing the last major military leader of the Separatist alliance. With the Separatists on the brink of defeat, Palpatine executed the final step in his decades-long scheme. In a private conversation with Anakin, he revealed himself as Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord the Jedi had been searching for since the Naboo crisis. Rather than immediately attacking Palpatine, Anakin found himself conflicted. The Chancellor had just implied he knew secret techniques that could save people from death, knowledge that might protect Padme from Anakin's prophetic visions. Torn between his duty as a Jedi and his desperate desire to save his wife, Anakin reported Palpatine's revelation to Jedi Master Mace Windu. After instructing Anakin to wait at the temple, Windu gathered 3 other Jedi Masters, Kit Fisto, Saesee Tiin, and Agen Kolar, and went to arrest the Chancellor in his office. The confrontation that followed would alter the course of galactic history. Palpatine, dropping his kindly Chancellor persona, revealed his true Sith nature by drawing a red lightsaber and attacking the Jedi. With shocking speed and ferocity, he killed 3 of the Masters within seconds, leaving only Mace Windu to oppose him. Windu and Sidious engaged in a furious duel that moved through the Chancellor's office and out onto a windswept ledge. There, the Jedi Master managed to disarm Palpatine and had him cornered, apparently defeated. At this crucial moment, Anakin arrived, having decided he needed Palpatine alive to save Padme. Seeing Windu preparing to strike down the seemingly helpless Sidious, who was begging for mercy while claiming to be too weak to continue fighting, Anakin made the fateful decision that would damn both himself and the galaxy. He severed Windu's sword arm, leaving the Jedi Master defenseless against Sidious, who immediately dropped his helpless act and unleashed a torrent of Force lightning that sent Windu plummeting to his death. Having directly contributed to the death of a Jedi Master, Anakin recognized he had crossed a line from which there was no return. Overwhelmed by a combination of guilt, fear for Padme, and desperation to save her at any cost, he pledged himself to Darth Sidious's teachings. The Sith Lord bestowed upon him a new identity, Darth Vader, completing Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side. With a new Sith apprentice at his side, Sidious enacted the final phase of his plan, codenamed Order 66. This command, when transmitted to clone commanders across the galaxy, activated their hidden behavioral programming, causing them to identify Jedi as traitors to be executed immediately. Across countless battlefields and peacekeeping missions, the terrible order played out with brutal efficiency. While this galaxy-wide betrayal unfolded, Darth Vader led a full battalion of clone troopers from the 501st Legion in an assault on the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. This was no battlefield confrontation, but a deliberate massacre. Vader and his troops systematically eliminated everyone they encountered, from the most experienced masters to the youngest initiates barely old enough to hold training lightsabers. The temple, which had stood as a beacon of light and knowledge for thousands of years, burned through the Coruscant night as the heart of the Jedi Order was torn out. Vader personally executed younglings hiding in the council chamber, extinguishing future generations of Jedi before they could even begin their journey. By the following morning, the Jedi Order had been all but destroyed. The majority of knights and masters lay dead across the galaxy, victims of the clones they had led and fought alongside throughout the war. The temple, their spiritual home, was a smoking ruin filled with the bodies of their fallen brothers and sisters. Chancellor Palpatine, his face now distorted from his confrontation with Mace Windu, addressed an emergency session of the Senate. He presented a narrative in which the Jedi had attempted to overthrow the legitimate government of the Republic and assassinate him as Chancellor. Displaying his injuries as evidence of Jedi treachery, he declared the Order enemies of the state. Using the Jedi threat as justification, Palpatine announced the reorganization of the Galactic Republic into the First Galactic Empire, with himself as Emperor to ensure safety and continuing stability. Far from objecting to this death of democracy, the Senate responded with enthusiastic applause, willingly surrendering liberty in exchange for the illusion of security. While the Senate cheered the birth of the Empire, a handful of Jedi managed to survive the initial purge through various circumstances. Grand Master Yoda on Kashyyyk aiding Wookiee forces when Order 66 was issued, sensed the deaths of his fellow Jedi through the Force and managed to escape his clone assassins with help from Wookiee allies, including Chewbacca. Obi-Wan Kenobi similarly survived on Utapau when the blast from Commander Cody's cannon knocked him from a high cliff into water below rather than killing him directly. After regaining consciousness, Kenobi was able to evade subsequent search parties and escape the planet. A few others also slipped through the Empire's net. Cal Kestis, a Padawan on Bracca, survived when his master sacrificed himself to save his student. Caleb Dume, later known as Kanan Jarrus, escaped the sudden execution of his master Depa Billaba and went into hiding. Ahsoka Tano, though no longer officially a Jedi after leaving the Order, was targeted by clone troops but managed to fake her death and disappear. These survivors, however, were rare exceptions to the Purge's terrible effectiveness. Approximately 99% of all Jedi across the galaxy perished when Order 66 was executed. The High Council was virtually annihilated, with only Yoda and Obi-Wan remaining of its membership. In the aftermath of this catastrophe, Obi-Wan and Yoda managed to rendezvous through the help of Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan, one of the few political figures who recognized the horror of what was happening. The two surviving council members infiltrated the Smoking Jedi Temple, fighting past clone guards to reach the communications center. There, they recalibrated the temple's emergency beacon, changing its automated message from Palpatine's trap ordering all Jedi to return to Coruscant to a new warning instructing any survivors to stay away and go into hiding. This small act might have saved the lives of Jedi who otherwise would have returned straight into the Emperor's hands. Reviewing security recordings within the temple, Obi-Wan made a devastating discovery. The recordings showed Anakin, now Darth Vader, leading the clone assault and personally killing Jedi. For Kenobi, who had raised Anakin from childhood and considered him a brother, this revelation was crushing. With the full extent of the catastrophe now clear, Yoda and Obi-Wan resolved to confront the two Sith Lords directly. Yoda would face Emperor Palpatine in the Senate building, while Obi-Wan would track down Vader, whom they learned had been sent to the volcanic world of Mustafar to eliminate the remaining separatist leadership. Yoda's confrontation with Sidious took place in the empty Senate chamber itself, a fitting location for the clash between the leaders of the Jedi and Sith. Their duel was extraordinary, with both masters demonstrating force abilities far beyond normal limits. They hurled Senate pods at each other, exchanged blasts of force energy, and engaged in lightsaber combat at speeds barely visible to the normal eye. Despite his considerable power, Yoda ultimately found himself outmatched by Sidious's raw, dark side strength. After a fierce struggle that destroyed much of the Senate chamber, Yoda was forced to flee, recognizing that the confrontation was lost. With the help of Bail Organa, the diminutive Grand Master escaped Coruscant, his failure weighing heavily upon him. On Mustafar, Obi-Wan's confrontation with his former apprentice proved equally tragic. After stowing away aboard Padme's ship when she went to confront Anakin, Kenobi emerged to find the situation already deteriorating. Anakin, consumed by dark side paranoia, had attacked his wife, suspecting her of betrayal when he saw Obi-Wan. What followed was one of the most personal and vicious lightsaber duels in recorded history. Master and former apprentice, once as close as brothers, fought across the hellish landscape of Mustafar. Their battle took them through separatist facilities, across rivers of lava, and onto floating platforms above the molten surface. Throughout the fight, Obi-Wan tried to reach the man he had known, but found only Vader's rage and hatred in response. Even when Kenobi gained a tactical advantage on the shore of a lava river, warning Anakin not to attempt a dangerous leap, Vader's arrogance drove him forward. In the ensuing moments, Obi-Wan severed Anakin's remaining organic limbs with a single stroke of his lightsaber, leaving the fallen Jedi maimed and burning on the bank of the lava flow. Despite their years together, Kenobi could not bring himself to deliver a merciful death blow. Instead, he took Anakin's lightsaber and left him to what seemed like certain death, his heart broken by the complete fall of the student he had raised and loved. Unknown to Obi-Wan, Emperor Palpatine had sensed his apprentice's distress and was already en route to Mustafar. Imperial medical teams managed to save what remained of Anakin Skywalker, encasing him in the iconic black life support armor that would make Darth Vader a symbol of terror throughout the galaxy for decades to come. Amid these twin defeats for the Jedi, a small glimmer of hope emerged. Padme Amidala, though gravely injured from Vader's Force choke, survived long enough to give birth to twins, Luke and Leia, before succumbing to her injuries. These children, bearing the Skywalker bloodline with its tremendous Force potential, represented a possible future for both the Jedi and the galaxy. Knowing the Emperor would hunt any Force-sensitive children of Anakin Skywalker, Yoda and Obi-Wan made the difficult decision to separate the twins and hide them from their father and Palpatine. Baby Leia was adopted by Bail Organa and his wife on Alderaan to be raised as a princess with no knowledge of her true parentage. Luke was taken to Tatooine to be raised by Anakin's stepbrother Owen Lars and his wife Beru as a simple moisture farmer. With this task complete, the last two Jedi Council members went into exile themselves. Obi-Wan Kenobi settled on Tatooine, adopting the name Ben and living as a hermit in the desert wastes, keeping a distant watch over young Luke. Yoda retreated to the swamp world of Dagobah, a planet so rich with life energy that it created a natural vergence in the Force, masking his presence from Sith detection. The fall of the Jedi was now complete. In just a few days, the Order had gone from the respected guardians of peace and justice throughout the galaxy to hunted fugitives, branded as traitors by Imperial propaganda. The speed and totality of this reversal left most citizens stunned and confused, making them susceptible to the Empire's narrative that painted the Jedi as conspirators who had attempted to seize control of the government. For Emperor Palpatine, Order 66 represented only the beginning of his campaign against the Jedi. Though the initial purge had been devastatingly effective, he knew some Jedi had escaped. To hunt these survivors, he established special forces dedicated solely to tracking down and eliminating Force users. Chief among these hunters was Darth Vader himself. Having recovered from his injuries on Mustafar, though permanently reliant on his life support suit, Vader became the Emperor's foremost enforcer. His connection to the Force, combined with his intimate knowledge of Jedi training and techniques, made him uniquely qualified to hunt his former brethren. Supporting Vader in this mission was the Inquisitorius, a cadre of dark side Force users who answered directly to the Dark Lord. Many Inquisitors were themselves former Jedi who had turned to the dark side, either during the Clone Wars or after capture in the early days of the Purge. Their familiarity with Jedi methods proved invaluable in tracking down survivors. The Great Jedi Purge continued well beyond the initial night of Order 66. In the months and years that followed, Imperial forces systematically hunted for sensitive individuals across the galaxy. Any discovered Jedi were given a simple choice: convert to the dark side and serve the Empire, or die. One particularly grim episode occurred approximately 1 year after the fall of the Republic. A group of surviving Jedi Masters, having received word of a possible sanctuary, gathered on Kessel for what they hoped would be the beginning of a resistance movement. This meeting, later known as the Conclave at Kessel, was in reality a trap set by Imperial intelligence. Darth Vader personally led the raid on the Conclave, confronting and killing multiple Jedi Masters in a single engagement. This event demoralized many remaining Jedi who had harbored hopes of reorganizing, demonstrating the Empire's reach and Vader's terrible power. The thoroughness of the Purge surpassed anything seen in previous conflicts between Jedi and Sith. Unlike earlier eras when Jedi might regroup after defeats, the combination of Order 66's sudden betrayal, the fall of the Temple, and the relentless Imperial hunting left no safe havens or organizational structure for survivors. Emperor Palpatine enhanced these efforts by creating the position of Emperor's Hand, Force-sensitive agents trained personally by Sidious in limited dark side techniques. These operatives, such as Mara Jade, operated independently, often unaware of each other's existence, each believing themselves to be the Emperor's unique agent. Their primary mission was identifying and reporting possible Jedi for elimination. The Empire also instituted galaxy-wide propaganda efforts designed to erase the true history of the Jedi. Official records were altered to portray the Order as power-hungry mystics who had manipulated galactic events for their own benefit. Within a generation, many younger citizens questioned whether Jedi powers had ever been real or merely exaggerated legends. By approximately 10 BBY, this combined approach of hunting, propaganda, and historical revision had achieved remarkable success. The Jedi Order, which had stood for over 25,000 years as guardians of peace and justice, had been reduced to a handful of hidden individuals and dismissed as little more than a religious cult by many ordinary citizens. Those few Jedi who survived lived in constant danger, forced to suppress their Force abilities and abandon any visible trappings of their former lives. Some, like Obi-Wan and Yoda, isolated themselves on remote worlds. Others attempted to blend into civilian populations, taking menial jobs that would not attract attention. A few tried to continue Jedi work in secret, helping those in need while evading Imperial detection, though such actions invariably led to discovery and death. This period marked the most complete victory the Sith had ever achieved over their ancient enemies. The Jedi had not merely been defeated in battle, but effectively erased from galactic consciousness. The Republic they had served for millennia had been transformed into an empire ruled by the very evil they had spent generations fighting. The Force itself seemed to have fallen out of balance, with darkness ascendant and light reduced to the faintest glimmer. For the Sith, this represented the culmination of a revenge plot spanning 1,000 years since Darth Bane had established the Rule of Two. What countless Sith armies had failed to accomplish through direct confrontation, Darth Sidious had achieved through patience, manipulation, and strategic brilliance. The Jedi who had once filled the halls of the Temple on Coruscant, who had served as diplomats and peacekeepers throughout Republic space, who had trained generation after generation in the ways of the Force, were now almost entirely gone. Their lightsabers had been collected as trophies or destroyed, their teachings suppressed, their very memory fading from the collective consciousness of a galaxy now ruled by fear. This dark era would continue for nearly 2 decades, with the Empire's grip tightening and Jedi presence reduced to whispers and legends. Yet even in this darkest period, the legacy of the Jedi persisted in subtle ways. The twins born to Anakin and Padme grew in secret, their potential in the Force temporarily dormant but not eliminated. Scattered survivors maintained their commitment to the light, even if they could not openly practice Jedi ways. And perhaps most importantly, both Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, though in exile, maintained their connection to the Force and their dedication to Jedi principles. They waited patiently for the moment when a new hope might arise, when the children of Anakin Skywalker might be ready to learn the ways of the Force, and perhaps one day rebuild what had been so thoroughly destroyed. The fall of the Republic and the purge of the Jedi Order represented the end of an era that had lasted for 25,000 years. The democracy that had united thousands of worlds under principles of cooperation and mutual benefit had been replaced by an authoritarian regime built on fear and domination. The Jedi, who had served as guardians of peace and justice since before the Republic itself existed, had been virtually eliminated in a single stroke. Yet, in the eyes of most citizens, life continued. The galaxy was still governed, commerce still flowed, and ordinary people still went about their business. For many, especially those in core worlds who benefited from imperial policies, the transition seemed almost seamless. The profound tragedy that had occurred was visible only to those few who understood what had truly been lost. Hope can survive even in the darkest times. As the Empire tightened its grip on the galaxy, the flame of the Jedi tradition flickered, but never completely died out. The path from total defeat to eventual rebirth would span 2 decades and depend on the courage of a single young man carrying his father's legacy. The period immediately following the Republic's fall became known to the few surviving Jedi as the Dark Times. With the Order effectively destroyed and its members hunted across the stars, the 25,000-year legacy of the Jedi seemed all but extinguished. Emperor Palpatine worked systematically to erase even the memory of the Jedi from galactic consciousness, portraying them in official histories as dangerous cultists who had attempted to seize power. Imperial propaganda painted the Jedi as traitors, and citizens were encouraged to report any suspected Jedi activity to authorities. Those few Jedi who survived the initial purge found themselves transformed from respected peacekeepers into fugitives, forced to hide their abilities and abandon their former identities. Some survivors chose to completely disconnect from their Jedi past, throwing away their lightsabers and trying to build new lives as ordinary citizens. Others wandered the fringes of Imperial space, using their abilities discreetly to help people while constantly moving to avoid detection. A rare handful maintained some form of resistance, though open defiance almost invariably led to discovery and death. During these years, Obi-Wan Kenobi remained hidden on Tatooine, living as a hermit in the desert wastes under the name Ben. Local settlers viewed him as an eccentric old man, someone to be avoided rather than respected. From a distance, he watched over young Luke Skywalker as the boy grew up on his uncle's moisture farm, completely unaware of his heritage or the larger galactic destiny that awaited him. Meanwhile, on the swamp world of Dagobah, Master Yoda lived in complete isolation, communing with the Force and occasionally communicating with the spirit of Obi-Wan through techniques they had learned from the deceased Master Qui-Gon Jinn. The planet's strong natural force presence helped mask Yoda's location from Imperial detection, allowing the ancient master to await the time when a new generation might be ready for training. By approximately 5 BBY, the Purge had been so successful that there were virtually no active Jedi left in the galaxy. Both Yoda and Obi-Wan had come to believe that the Skywalker twins, Luke and Leia, represented the only real hope for the future of the Jedi tradition. After nearly 15 years of Imperial rule, the possibility of a coordinated Jedi resistance had vanished completely. However, this same period saw the beginnings of a wider resistance against Imperial oppression. Disparate rebel cells began forming across the galaxy, eventually coalescing into what would become the Alliance to Restore the Republic, commonly called the Rebel Alliance. While not initially led by Jedi, this movement benefited from the contributions of several Force users who had survived the Purge. One such individual was Caleb Doom. After years of hiding his Jedi heritage, Kanan joined a small rebel cell operating from the starship Ghost. There he encountered a Force-sensitive teenager named Ezra Bridger, whom he reluctantly took as an apprentice despite his own incomplete training. Together with the Ghost crew, Kanan and Ezra became important figures in the early rebellion, particularly in the Lothal sector. Their activities represented the first significant Jedi involvement in galactic affairs since the Purge, though their impact remained limited to specific regions rather than the galaxy as a whole. Another key figure from this period was Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker's former Padawan, who had left the Jedi Order before its fall. Though no longer identifying as a Jedi, Ahsoka used her considerable Force abilities and combat skills to aid the rebellion under the codename Fulcrum, helping coordinate between different rebel cells and providing critical intelligence. These early Force users in the rebellion kept the embers of Jedi knowledge alive and demonstrated that the Empire could be effectively opposed, even by small groups. Yet the flame of the Jedi Order itself remained unlit, with formal training and traditions largely lost, and the number of Force users capable of passing on these skills dwindling with each passing year. All of this changed dramatically in 0 BBY, when a series of seemingly random events brought Luke Skywalker into contact with Obi-Wan Kenobi. When Imperial forces searching for stolen Death Star plans killed Luke's aunt and uncle, the young farm boy found himself with no reason to remain on Tatooine. Guided by Obi-Wan, Luke took his first steps into a larger world, beginning the journey that would eventually lead to the rebirth of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan provided Luke with his father's lightsaber and began the basics of Force training, teaching him elementary principles of sensing energy and responding to it. Though this instruction was cut short by their mission to rescue Princess Leia from the Death Star, it planted seeds that would later flourish. Aboard the Death Star, Obi-Wan confronted his former apprentice Darth Vader in what would be their final duel. Understanding that his greater purpose now lay in guiding Luke rather than defeating Vader directly, Obi-Wan willingly sacrificed himself, allowing Vader to strike him down while he became one with the Force. This selfless act served multiple purposes. It allowed Luke and his companions to escape the Death Star. It demonstrated to Luke the reality of the Force and the commitment of true Jedi. And it enabled Obi-Wan to transcend physical limitations, becoming able to communicate with Luke as a Force spirit. Following the destruction of the Death Star at the Battle of Yavin, where Luke trusted his Force instincts rather than targeting computers to make the crucial shot, the young Skywalker became an active member of the Rebel Alliance. Though still only a novice in Force techniques, Luke represented something that had nearly disappeared from the galaxy, a person openly seeking to follow the Jedi path. For the next 3 years, Luke continued fighting with the rebellion while trying to develop his abilities largely through self-guided practice. Without formal instruction, his progress was limited, though his natural connection to the Force allowed him some success. During this period, he occasionally heard Obi-Wan's voice guiding him at critical moments, though the full nature of this connection remained mysterious to him. In 3 ABY, following the Rebel evacuation of their base on Hoth, Luke received clearer direction from Obi-Wan's spirit. He was instructed to travel to the Dagobah system, where he would find Yoda, the Jedi Master who had trained Obi-Wan. This meeting would prove crucial for both Luke and the future of the Jedi. Upon arriving on Dagobah, Luke encountered what appeared to be a strange, diminutive swamp dweller, only to discover this was actually Master Yoda himself. Initially reluctant to train Luke due to concerns about his age and temperament, Yoda eventually agreed to instruct the young Skywalker in Jedi ways. Unlike the structured years-long training typical of the old Jedi Order, Luke's instruction was compressed and urgent. Yoda focused on core principles, emphasizing mental discipline, connection to the Force, and the danger of the dark side. Physical training was combined with philosophical teaching, all aimed at preparing Luke for the challenges that lay ahead. Despite Yoda's warnings about incomplete training, Luke abruptly left Dagobah when he sensed his friends in danger at Cloud City. This decision led to his direct confrontation with Darth Vader, a battle for which he was not yet prepared. In the devastating duel that followed, Luke lost his hand and his father's lightsaber, but most shockingly, learned the truth of his parentage, that Vader was in fact Anakin Skywalker. This revelation shattered Luke's understanding of his own identity and mission. The man he had wanted to emulate and avenge was actually the same person he was fighting against. Despite Vader's offer to join him in ruling the galaxy, Luke chose possible death over embracing the dark side, throwing himself into Cloud City's depth before being rescued by his friends. The year that followed represented a period of intensive growth for Luke. He constructed a new lightsaber, a rite of passage for Jedi that symbolized his progression from student to aspiring knight. The weapon's green blade distinguished it from his father's blue saber and from Vader's red one, perhaps reflecting Luke's unique path that would avoid both his father's hubris and his later fall. When Luke returned to Dagobah in 4 ABY, he found Yoda dying. The 900-year-old master confirmed what Vader had told him about his parentage, and with his final words, placed the future of the Jedi Order squarely on Luke's shoulders. "When gone am I, the last of the Jedi will you be," Yoda told him, formalizing the transfer of responsibility from the old order to its sole heir. Yoda's peaceful passing into the Force marked the end of the old Jedi Order. The unbroken line of masters and students stretching back 25,000 years to the days of Tython now continued only through Luke Skywalker, whose training had been abbreviated and unconventional by traditional standards. Despite this enormous responsibility, Luke's immediate focus was more personal: the redemption of his father. Learning from Obi-Wan's spirit that Leia was his twin sister, Luke now understood that his family connection to Vader might be leveraged to turn the Sith Lord back to the light, something both Yoda and Obi-Wan believed impossible. During the Battle of Endor, Luke surrendered to Imperial forces specifically to confront his father. Brought before Emperor Palpatine aboard the second Death Star, Luke faced the ultimate test of his Jedi training. The Emperor sought to corrupt Luke as he had corrupted Anakin, using his concerns for his friends and sister as leverage to push him toward the dark side. When goaded into a lightsaber duel with Vader, Luke initially fought defensively, trying to reach the good he sensed within his father, rather than defeat him outright. Only when Vader threatened to turn Leia to the dark side did Luke give in to anger, aggressively overpowering his father and cutting off his mechanical hand, mirroring his own injury from their previous duel. In that moment of victory, staring at his own artificial hand and recognizing the parallel with his father, Luke made the most important decision of his life. He deactivated his lightsaber and threw it aside, declaring to the Emperor that he was a Jedi, like his father before him. In choosing compassion over violence, even at the risk of his own life, Luke demonstrated the true essence of what it meant to be a Jedi Knight. Enraged, Emperor Palpatine subjected Luke to excruciating torture with Force lightning. As Luke suffered and pleaded for help, something awakened in Darth Vader. Watching his son dying before him, the love Anakin Skywalker had suppressed for decades finally broke through his Sith conditioning. In the most consequential moment of his life, Anakin turned against his master. Despite his weakened state and the damage to his life support systems caused by the Emperor's lightning, he lifted Palpatine and threw him down a reactor shaft, ending the Sith Lord's reign of terror at the cost of his own life. With both Palpatine and himself mortally wounded, Anakin Skywalker fulfilled the prophecy of the Chosen One, bringing balance to the Force by destroying the Sith. In his final moments, he asked Luke to remove his mask so he could look upon his son with his own eyes. For the first time in 23 years, Anakin Skywalker's face was visible again as he made peace with his son before becoming one with the Force. Luke escaped the Death Star before its destruction, bringing his father's body with him to Endor. There, he built a funeral pyre in the Jedi tradition, honoring Anakin Skywalker rather than Darth Vader. As the flames consumed his father's empty armor, Luke caught sight of the Force spirits of Yoda, Obi-Wan, and now Anakin himself, reunited in the light side of the Force. This moment marked both an end and a beginning. The Sith were destroyed, the Emperor was dead, and the Empire had been dealt a crippling blow from which it would never fully recover. More importantly for the Jedi legacy, Luke Skywalker stood as both the last knight of the old tradition and the first of the new.